Good morning and welcome back to Planet Doug Behind the Scenes for Sunday, February 11th. And I'm here in Port Dickson, Malaysia. And I have a few things on my mind this morning. A little bit of an update about me, what I'm doing, some YouTube stories. That's what I call the section where I discuss some YouTube travel vlogs. There's a new one from Itchy Boots, which is quite exciting. A video from a British couple riding a van around the world, and they were in Malaysia. Their channel is called Tread the Globe. And then finally a video from Simon Wilson. He was one of the trio of UK vloggers that went to Pakistan recently. Bald and Bankrupt, Backpacker Ben, and then this guy Simon Wilson, which I knew very little about. And I was waiting for his video from Karachi to see what he had to say about their experience there. So he posted his video. I also have a new movie for me in Pop Culture Roundup, and then, of course, a couple of pet peeves, things that set me off about the world. So let's dive into behind the scenes. First of all, me and my life. As I said, I'm here in Port Dickson. One interesting thing is that I was previously in a different hotel in Port Dickson. I was staying at the seafront. And then for whatever reason, good reasons or bad reasons or no reason at all, I decided to move to a new hotel. And it's about 13 kilometers away from the seafront. This place is called the SPD Backpackers. And now that I think about it, maybe I'll stick in a short video here. The other day, my very first day here, I did a little bit of a film description of where I'm staying. But now that I shot that video, I don't know what to do with it. It's not a big enough event for me, to put it on Planet Doug. And I shot it, and it's more like a behind the scenes sort of thing. So I'll stick that video in right now. Welcome back to another day on Planet Doug. And I don't know where this video is going to fit into the world of Planet Doug, but I just moved across Port Dickson from the PD Seafront Hotel into a new place. This is the SPD Backpackers. It's about 13, 14 kilometers away from where I was. Why am I here? How did I end up here? To be honest, now that I am here, I don't know. It's just like one thing led to another. I was roaming around Agoda, looking at room options in Kuala Lumpur, in Malacca, here in Port Dickson, and eventually I just got frustrated with the search, and I just said, I'll just stay here for a few days. I'll stay here during Chinese New Year. And I thought it'd be cool to see a new area, at least a new neighborhood, if not a new part of the city. But anyway, I just moved into my room. I got a single room here. It's just kind of got a real backpacker vibe, this place, the SPD Backpackers. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute, but first the room and facilities tour. So you could probably see the room behind me, but there it is without me standing in the way. I got myself a wardrobe, I got myself a garbage can, I've got myself some light switches and some electrical outlets out there. It's so high though, I don't know what use one of these is to anybody. And an electrical outlet down there where I can plug in my kettle. And since I'm all decked out with gear, I can run my extension cord all the way out here beside the bed. And then I can plug in all of my chargers and things like that. And a lonely, sad looking single bed over there. But this is pretty much all I need. I could think of a dozen things to do to this room to make it more livable. Just things, little touches. I'm not talking about major renovations, but anything, because this little gizmo here, this little table I set up there wasn't meant to be there. It was off in this corner, but I need some kind of a bedside table, a little chair would be nice in here, some kind of a shelf over here, you can put your things on. So it's not the best room in terms of setup, but you can make yourself at home. And I have all kinds of gizmos to make things more livable. And then the rest of the place, let's go for a little bit of a walk. So this is pretty much the whole place. There's a welcome sofa over here. And oh, this will be interesting. You can see what I'm filming with. Look at that. Smartphone. Absolutely, using a smartphone. And I found out I have some kind of a cable I've got the right cable and the right adapter that actually feeds audio into the smartphone. So that was kind of interesting to figure out. So we got some rooms here. I don't know how big or small they are, 1, 2, 3, or 4 person rooms. And shared bathrooms here. So there's one bathroom right here. Nice and spacious, this one, you know, with a sink and a mirror, but that always cracks me up. I mean, I have no idea who can use this mirror. I mean, even, yeah, how short would you have to be? I need the mirror up here. But anyway, it has a hot water shower over there. Couple of bathrooms here, one like Western toilet, but it also has a shower, and then a squat toilet with another shower. A couple of sinks over here, and another completely useless mirror unless you get way down here. And then it has a small kitchen area. And it's not meant for cooking or anything like that, but it does have hot and cold water and cups and tea and things like that. And then a table over here. So if you had food from outside, you could bring it in here and eat here. But obviously this isn't, you know, they don't have a fridge and there's no stove or anything like that. So it's not a true hostel. Got a view of some wilderness out there. And yeah, that's the whole place from one end to the other. And yeah, the owner, very interesting guy. You know, you meet people and it's astonishing the variety of people that there are in the world. Because I got here at about 1 o'clock and check-in isn't until 2. I didn't want to cause trouble. So I just went for a walk around my neighborhood. I'm like right in the middle of a big strip mall. There's 7-Elevens and things like that. So I went to the 7-Eleven to get a coffee, and I was just going to sit down at the counter at 7-Eleven and wait until 2 o'clock. But while I was there, a man came in and said, "Hey, are you Doug?" "Yeah, yes, sir, I am." And that was the owner of this place. He saw me walking around with my backpack, and yeah, he just came out to get me and said, "Yeah, we can check you in right now." And turns out, like, they have a door down at the front that has a sign on it that has a photograph or a graphic cutout of a man with a metal detector, like walking along a beach kind of thing with a metal detector. And I guess SPD Backpackers is associated with metal detecting because the owner also has a metal detecting store in Bali. And he spends, you know, 3 weeks here, and then once a month he goes to Bali for a week to, you know, manage his store. I guess he sells metal detectors there. And then this guest house was kind of set up around the idea of a, you know, metal detecting club or metal detecting society, a place for fellow metal detectors to come and stay and talk shop and compare metal detectors, and then go out, I guess, onto the beaches of Port Dickson and go metal detecting, things like that. And he owns a restaurant here as well, right on the corner. So he has at least 3 businesses, you know. So yeah, I mean, the people in the world, right, they do so many unusual things. And I did mention to him that, you know, years ago I'd watched a TV show from the UK. I think it was called The Detectorists. I couldn't think of the name at the time, but I said to him, "Oh, you know, metal detecting, if you're interested in that, there's a really funny, well-written show from the UK about metal detectors." And I was trying to get that idea across to him, but I got that reaction that I get from most people when I bring things up that I think might be of interest to them. They're just like, there's just like a unfocused look, you know, they're kind of looking at me. And I'm waiting for a reaction, like he's into seriously into metal detecting, and I told him that there's an entire TV show all about metal detecting. And I thought he'd go, oh, really? A show? Wow, what's the name of it? But he just kind of looked at me, and then he kept talking about the guest house, and I'm like, no, it's a show about metal detecting. It's really good. It's well written. It's funny. It's based in the UK. He said, Like, I never get the reaction that I'm looking for. But I guess people don't get as excited about the things that I get excited about. But anyway, in terms of my wardrobe, like this room has no table, no shelves. So basically all of your stuff gets dumped on the floor, but it does have a wardrobe, and the wardrobe is actually nice and clean. So I decided to use it this time. So that does make the room more livable, if you're willing to use the wardrobe. So I have, my clothing and my luggage here. And I even used the drawers, so I've got all my camera stuff here in one drawer. And then a bunch of random items, here in the other drawer. So at least if you take advantage of the wardrobe, the room does become, a bit more livable. But, I always want more livability. I want more stuff that I can use at the very least. Give me my Planet Doug hook on the door. Where's my hook? Planet Doug is the land of hooks. If I ruled a kingdom, I would put hooks on every door. There are hooks here, but it's not very convenient because when you open this door, of course, now you don't have access to anything. Anyway, it's not enough hooks. You can never have too many hooks. There's never enough. So I would at least put hooks there. Well, hopefully that worked out using the smartphone. People talk about using smartphones to record video, and I'm always resisting the idea because it is, it's kind of a hassle. But you can see the rig that I came up with perhaps in the, oh no, you can't. Here's the thing, I'm so confused about using a smartphone. I don't even know where it's pointing, like where am I filming from? I have to use the front-facing camera because it is the highest quality. I can't use the selfie camera, so I have no screen in front of me. I mean, that's what I'm staring at as I'm filming, what you see in the mirror. And so there's no tally light. I can't tell if it's recording or not. There's no audio meter. I have no idea whether it's recording audio or not. And I can't see the screen. So there's no front-facing screen. I have no idea what I'm recording. And I always get confused because the lens is over here on the side. And I always think the lens is centered. So I always get confused about that. I had to put together a few items in order to get all of this to work. So I have a smartphone mounting rig right there, and the phone is gripped by that. And this rig that I bought many years ago has a mounting cold shoe bracket on the top, so I can mount my Rode Wireless Go up there. And then I had to put in three different adapters to get from the phone to anything like this Jaws Flex clamp. So it's a very complicated rig to put together. But once I figured all of that out, I mean, it does work, but I don't like it. I would much rather use any kind of a camera. But it is better, I think. Even my smartphone is better in low light than a GoPro. So that's why I thought I'd try it out here, in a low light environment, see how it looks. So that's it. Oh, here I am inside my single room, and I have some video editing to do. So I don't really care where I am. I'm just going to settle down here and start editing video and drinking instant coffee. So that's it, my room tour, my new place in Port Dickson. And I am going to go out and explore a little bit in this area, get to know my neighborhood. There's a few things I want to go check out, and I'll shoot video when I do that. But for now, that is it for today. And I'll see you in the next video. Of course, an interesting thing about that video for me is that I used my smartphone to do it. And shooting, using a smartphone in this setting is kind of smart because it is so much better than a GoPro in low light. And anywhere indoors you can consider to be low light. So, who knows why? Smartphone manufacturers, they've figured it out. They have the technology. I mean, the sensor is pinpoint small in the smartphone. It's as small as a GoPro sensor. So, like, why is it so much better in low light? I mean, I guess a variety of optic engineering reasons. But anyway, they are better. But I really struggled to figure out how to get audio to work. I have a million adapters and cables here, and I've tried to use smartphones in the past, and every single time I was unable to do it easily because none of my cables would connect my microphone to my phone. And it's been so long since I've done it, I couldn't remember how to do it anymore, because I eventually figured it out, but I couldn't remember how I did it. So I had to go through all this testing. You've got the TRS cable to TRRS. No, that doesn't work. TRS to TRS? No, that doesn't work. TRRS to TRRS? No, that doesn't work. You're using all of these, and then you use USB-C in the Rode Wireless Go to the USB-C port on your phone. That doesn't work. And then I went through a whole bunch of combinations. TRS to adapter to USB-C, that didn't work. And I finally tried TRS cable coming out of the Wireless Go to TRRS on the other end of the cable, plug that into an adapter with the USB-C on the other side, plug that into the smartphone, and suddenly I got an audio signal. So I was like, whoa, okay, now I just have to remember that's how I did it. Plus you have to use I talked about it in the video, I've got a special mount, and I bought that one in particular because it has a smart cold shoe mount on the top. So it has a place where you can connect a microphone. I mean, you can't just, grab your phone. I mean, you could, but then you're using the built-in mics, and I find those to be quite bad. It really changes, like if you turn your phone around, the audio really changes, and you're holding the phone, so you're constantly getting handling noises, and you end up covering up the microphone, or who knows what. Anyway, I have to use a grip, and so I get the grip, and then I mount the microphone. And then it kind of works. But by the time you're done getting the grip set up, sliding your phone into the grip, making very sure that you're not clamping the grip down on the power button, which I've done many times in the past. You got to get it positioned exactly right, then mounting the microphone, plugging in the microphone, checking to make sure it works. And then every time you check, you have to unplug the microphone, because when you plug a device into your smartphone, it takes over both microphone and headphone connections. So now that I had a microphone plugged in, I went to play back the video as a test to make sure the microphone was working, and I was getting no audio. And I thought, oh, that's not working either. But it's because the audio is being sent out the USB-C cable. So every time you're using a smartphone, at least the way mine works, I have to plug in the microphone, shoot, audio, shoot video. I have no idea whether it's recording audio because there's no audio recording meter. I can't see that there's a connection. And then if I want to check later, I have to unplug the microphone, play back the video. Now I get audio over the speakers. It's like, oh, okay, I got audio. But then I have to plug the microphone back in again and just cross my fingers that hopefully the microphone reconnected. It's just you just never know whether it's working or not. But then another problem for me that I talked about is that there's no tally light. I can't see that it's recording. There's nothing to indicate. And I can't see the screen at all, so I don't know if I'm framed up properly, because I have to use the front-facing camera facing me, and then all I see is the back of the phone. And there's nothing there, no screen, no lights, no nothing. So that's another problem. I mean, the problems just go on and on and on for me when using a smartphone. I've used it a lot more lately, and there are a couple of places where it is extremely useful for the reasons that people always mention, that, well, you always have it with you. So when the last video I just posted was from Medan. I just went to a simple noodle shop that was famous for the high quality of their noodles. I went there, had noodles, And then I wanted to get a little bit of B-roll of the noodles. And then the phone really works well for that, because you use the GoPro for that. It looks terrible. You can pan your GoPro over your noodles and it looks like GoPro video, and it's not in focus and it just doesn't look very good. And then I could bring my Olympus camera, which I'm using now, but that's overkill. This giant camera, and then you got to get it out of your knapsack and get it all set up, and you're like trying to pan it around your little bowl of noodles. It's overkill, and to be honest, the final results are not that good. You really have to know what you're doing with a camera like that, and I just don't, to be honest. And then in the end, this is a nice alternative where it's awkward to hold on to, but it's in your pocket, and then you just turn on video. You're not worrying about audio at this point. And then I can see the screen because I'm filming ahead of me. I'm not filming myself. So when you're panning over food, yeah, you just take this out of your pocket. And I've learned that with my phone, hitting the power button twice launches the camera. Boop, boop, camera's on. I have to switch it to video every time, which bothers me. It defaults to photo. And I want it to go to video, but I have to go to video, make sure I remember. And then you can sort of, another quick tip that I figured out is that you can launch the video recording by hitting the volume button. So that turns the camera on and off. Because I found hitting the button on the screen is really awkward. But now that I figured out how to control the camera using the buttons, so I don't have to move my fingers, I start recording with the power button up here, and I turn the camera on and off with at the volume button, and I turn it on and off with the power button on the bottom. So I can control the camera with my finger and thumb, and I can hold it. So it's really easy to get your finger in front of the lens too, because it's right on the side here. So you got to keep your fingers like this. And then you can, once you got all that figured out, you can sort of, pan around your food. It's really hard to keep it steady, but the stabilization is good enough, and the video quality is good enough. So it does have its place. Anyway, long way of saying that's how I shot that video about my guest house here. And it was an interesting little experiment. Anyway, I was talking about moving from hotel to hotel, and I had a crazy Planet Doug idea for that move, to be honest. And that idea was I was going to walk. I got plenty of time. My legs work. I've got a backpack. And 13 kilometers trudging down a busy Malaysian road, that's a big ask. But I thought, it'll be interesting. I'll shoot video along the way, and then I'll just walk along the ocean, because Port Dickson, as I discovered, is not really, when someone says I'm going to Port Dickson, they don't really mean the downtown core with the grocery stores, the McDonald's, and the Starbucks. What they're talking about is that plus an extended coastline that goes on for, 20, 25 kilometers of beaches, and then all of the resorts and hotels and apartment condominiums that you can rent that are all spread out along the shore. That's also considered Port Dickson I'm going to Port Dickson for a holiday. So I thought I could just walk along the ocean, stopping off at a variety of beaches, maybe having some small Planet Doug adventures along the way. And I was going to walk the whole way and make a whole day out of it. But right at the very end, I changed my mind, and for various reasons, but I changed my mind and I ended up getting a Grab. So I came here by car with a Grab driver, and I think I partially made that decision because the night before, when I was thinking about should I walk, should I take a Grab, I checked the price and I called up the Grab, and it was like 16 ringgit. And I thought, actually that's cheaper than I thought. So I thought, okay, let's just do that. Let's do the normal thing for a change, and let's not nearly kill myself, because my backpack is pretty heavy as well. I could talk about that as well. And it would have been a challenge, because I haven't walked that kind of distance with a full backpack for a very long time. So I don't even know whether I could physically have done it or not. But anyway, I looked at the price and I thought, well, you know, the hotels in Malaysia for me are fairly expensive anyway. So I'm like, well, you're paying this much for the hotel. Well, what's an extra 16 ringgit to get there? So that's how I changed my mind. But then the next morning, of course, when I went to book the Grab, the price had gone up to, well, not hugely, but it had gone up to 24 ringgit because, you know, nighttime is cheaper than daytime. I kind of forgot that Grab, you know, adjusts its prices throughout the day to take advantage of rush hour and things like that. So it was more like 24 ringgit. And in the end, the driver helped me out a lot, and I just bumped it up to 30 ringgit. So, you know, the trip to get here cost 30 ringgit in the end, as opposed to 16 ringgit. But the biggest problem with Grab, I find, is, again, how it's connected to phone numbers. And it's the same thing with WhatsApp, right? Every time I meet somebody new and they always want, oh, what's your, you know, can we connect on WhatsApp? What's your phone number? I was like, well, I can't, it doesn't work that way for me because the phone number I have now is not the phone number I used when I set up my WhatsApp account. That phone number was for a SIM card that maybe I got in Myanmar 5 years ago, or maybe I got it in Bangladesh. I don't know where that phone number was from, but it is my WhatsApp ID number, is my phone number. My account number is whatever phone number I was using, and my phone number keeps changing. And I never quite, I can't get the logic straight in my head how this is supposed to work. But anyway, Grab is the same thing. When you open a Grab account, you have to put in your phone number, and then they send you all these security codes to that phone number. And it's all based on the phone number of your device. And then, of course, I only use it for 1 month or 2 months, that phone number, and then it's gone, and I have a new phone number. So, you know, I tried to open up Grab on this phone, and then it said, oh, we sent a security code to the phone number ending in 5576. You know, respond to that. And I'm like, phone number ending in 5576. It's like, man, that's, I don't even remember. Like, they don't tell you the full phone number, of course, right? Because it's all security based. I don't even know what number that is anymore. So they're sending all these numbers, all these security codes to a phone number that doesn't even exist anymore. So now that Grab account is completely closed to me. I can never use it again because I cannot respond to the signals they're sending me. You know, it's like that, you know, the Star Trek movie, Voyage Home, where the intergalactic whales are trying to send a signal to the whales of Earth, and they're not getting a reply, so the whales get upset, you know. And then there's another, you know, the original Star Trek movie where that massive spaceship is sending a signal to its creator, and the creator is not responding, right? And that's what Grab is like. It's trying to send a message to me, but it's sending it in a way that I can't respond to. So every single time I go to a new country and I want to use Grab, I have to create a brand new Grab account every time based on the new number. And then when I move to a new country, the Grab account doesn't work anymore. Like, am I the only one that has to deal with this? If I am, what am I missing? What's the secret, right? And oddly enough, I think the Grab account on this phone, because I have, you know, 2 phones, and I need 2 phones for situations like this, and I'll talk about that in a minute as well. I just want to see whether this Grab is working or not. Is this the one that I used? Yeah, so the one on this phone is actually good to go. And even, I don't know, even using Grab I find confusing because, I don't know, I could go on and on about it. I ask for a Grab, whatever, Grab car, and then it says where to, and you know, and then you pick where to, and then it says choose this pickup, but I don't know what it's talking about exactly, and it's showing me Ankasa Residences, which is the hotel about half a kilometer away from here. It's like, why do I want to choose that as my pickup? I'm not there. It always shows me a pickup point miles away from where I am. And then I'm always thinking, well, there's the blue dot. The blue dot is where I am. Pick me up there, right? Anyway, so then I try to zoom in on the blue dot where I am, and then I try to pick a place, you know, like a little, like the name of my guest house, for example, but the name of my guest house doesn't show up on the copy of the map. So like, what do? Do I click the middle of the street? Do I just tell them, pick me up at the blue dot? I don't know what to do. Anyway, I find Grab confusing as well. Just the logic of the system. Anyway, I also, and when I've been in other countries like Indonesia, you use the local Grab or Gojek or something. That always drives me crazy, because the main advantage of these apps for me is you don't have to talk to anyone about logistics, right? They don't have to know where you are, because it's the blue dot on the map. You mark your pickup point on the map. Come here. But then in Indonesia, whenever you use it, next thing you know, your phone is ringing. And then the guy is speaking to you in Indonesian because he wants to know where you are. It's like, why are you asking me where I am? That's the whole point. Look on your app. It's the blue dot, the blue dot. That's where I am. But they always have to call you. So before I use Grab or Gojek in Indonesia, I would always have to find a local person first and ask them, like, okay, I'm going to use Grab. Would you mind hanging on just what, 1 minute? I'm going to book a ride. They might call me. And if they do, like, would you talk to them? And I did the same thing here in Malaysia. I was at the Seafront Hotel, and I was in the lobby. I was all set to go, you know, I had my backpack out there. I checked out of my room. I got my room deposit back. Everything was ready. You know, I feel like I'm launching a space shuttle or a satellite into orbit. There's so much preparation going into me getting a Grab. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it now. And then I spoke to the friendly clerk at the Seafront Hotel. And I said to her, there's a chance the driver is going to call me, and I don't know what language they're going to be speaking. It is Malaysia, so chances are there's going to be English as an option, but maybe not. And if this person calls me, would you mind talking to them, and maybe you can explain better? Because even if the guy does speak English and I say, oh, I'm at the Seafront Hotel, and he doesn't know that hotel, then maybe she can explain better in local language, you know, like she knows reference points. Okay, you know, we're located in the mall right beside the famous seafood restaurant. Like, she knows what the famous landmarks are. Anyway, so I cleared it with her. Would you mind doing this? And she said, okay, no problem, no problem. So then I'm like, you know, I hit the button. And it all worked out fine. Because again, this is Malaysia. Things are quite a bit more organized here than in Sumatra, where I was previously. In my last trips in Sumatra, I never used Grab or Gojek, and I never used it once, because I always had either my bicycle or a scooter or a friend who could drive me or something. I always had another option, so I never needed to. But here I used it, and then a guy accepted my you know, they have to, the system looks for a driver, and then a driver can see, you know, the ride request, and then I guess the drivers can accept it if they want to. And I guess the first one to accept it gets it. I don't know how that works either. Do Grab drivers compete with each other? Anyway, so then you know, someone said yes, and the guy said, on my way. So then he came, and I hopped in the front seat. Really nice guy, spoke English. We had a nice chat along the way. And for the ride, for my Grab destination, I didn't choose SPD Backpackers because I assumed nobody would know what that was and nobody would know where it was. And I don't like these kinds of difficulties. So what I did, I went onto Google Maps and I found a big fancy resort that everybody would know. And in this case, it was the Ankasa Residences or something like that. It's about half a kilometer away from here. And I just chose that as my destination. So when I got in the Grab, the driver confirmed with me, oh, so you want to go to the Ancasa's residence. He knew the place. And I said, yes. And then we're chatting, we're getting to know each other. He's a really friendly guy. He seems really flexible, very eager to do a good job. So when the topic of my destination came up again, he like double confirmed it. At that point, I did say, well, I'm not actually staying there. I'm staying at a small hostel called, the SPD Backpackers. But I'm just going to walk from Ancasa's to there. And then he said, no, don't worry, you don't have to do that. I'll take you to SPD Backpackers. I'll take you right there. Don't worry about it. And then the next time we were stuck in a big traffic jam at a red light, he just got out his phone and my phone. We went on Google Maps because he didn't know SPD Backpackers, but he looked to see, where it was. He's like, oh, okay, yeah. I know that shopping mall, because it's actually located in a strip mall of all kinds of restaurants and hardware stores and tourist shops and things like that. So anyway, he agreed to make the effort to take me half a kilometer farther from my original destination and help me find the exact door. He found the door of SPD Backpackers. And that wasn't easy to do, so I was very glad to have his help. So yeah, that ended up being, a typical sort of nutty Planet Doug experience, just understanding how it all works. And it always seems so different for other people, perhaps much easier. Like every travel vlog I watch seems to start inside a Grab. Someone in Kuala Lumpur, they're going to Batu Caves and they're going to make a video about it. They're always, inside their Grab car, or they're just getting out of their Grab and they're saying, yeah, we just took a Grab to Batu Caves and here we are. Like for me, the Grab ride, just getting a Grab to find you was like a 40-minute adventure before the day even begins. But for other people, taking a Grab is as easy as breathing, right? Maybe it's just because I don't do it often enough. So every time I do something like this, it's like a brand new experience and I have to figure it out all over again. And as I said, every time I try to use it in a new country, I've got to set up a brand new account. And then every time you do that, I had to do it this time as well. They start asking for biometric stuff. So even when I hit the button, I forgot about this, to confirm the ride, then I got a big window saying, oh, we have to, I forget what the language was, we have to confirm something, we have to do something, and you have to take a picture of yourself before we can actually get you a driver. So I'm like, oh, again? Because I have to do this with Grab over and over and over. So I find a place and you got to take your glasses off. You got to take your hat off. It's like taking a passport photo or something. You can't have anything covering up your features. And then you're trying to line up the little window and, and you don't want to take a bad picture of yourself. Your ego gets involved. So you're trying to get everything ready and then and it's always like the worst picture imaginable because this little box shows up and you have to center yourself in the box and you're trying to do it and then it just sort of takes your picture when you're not ready for it. Anyway, it did work and it says, oh, congratulations, you've been confirmed. You are not a wanted criminal, wanted by Interpol or something. They now taken your picture, so now we will get you a driver. So I had to go through all that as well, and I got to do that a lot. Yeah, so much stuff involved, right? So that was kind of funny. I mentioned I had something to say about having two phones, and I almost forgot about it, but I just remembered what that was connected to, because the night before I left from the seafront, I had this really funny moment because when I was at the seafront before, I had just come back from Sumatra with my bicycle. And I parked my bicycle in the lobby against this wall, a white wall. And it was always there, always in the same place. And every time I came out of my room and I came into the lobby, the first thing I do, my eyes are drawn to my bike. Oh, there's my bike, there's my bike, there's my bike. And then on this trip to the seafront, it was like it startled me every time because I'd come out of my room, go into the lobby, and my bike was gone. It's like, where's my bike? because I don't have my bike this time. But my brain was hardwired to expect to see my bike, and then it just wasn't there. And I eventually got used to that because I stayed there for like 4 nights. Yeah, 4 nights. But then on the very last day, in the afternoon, I guess, I came out of my room, I went into the lobby, and my bike was there. I was like, what the heck? I was like, oh, I'm going crazy, because my bike was leaning against the wall in the same spot. And I thought, what? Am I losing my mind? But of course, it was not my bike. Another guy, he's traveling all around Asia, all around Southeast Asia on a bicycle. So it looked like my bike. It looked like a touring bicycle. It had all the little doodads on it that you would expect, like a rear pannier rack, and a tire pump and a water bottle, things like that. And you wouldn't normally, you don't see that on all bicycles. So that's why when I first came around the corner, my brain reacted like, oh, there's my bike, because it looked like a touring bike. And then, of course, that only lasted like half a second, or if that. And then I realized, oh, yeah, okay, that's a different bike. So then I became very excited, and I went over the whole bike from front to back, examining all the bits and pieces, the brand names of all the parts, all the components, and what kind of a bike it was, and what kind of handlebars, what kind of gear shifting, just trying to see how the guy had his bike set up. And then I went to have lunch, and then when I came back, there was a foreigner, a Western Caucasian guy, sitting on the bench outside the seafront hotel. So of course I instantly assumed, okay, this must be the Cyclist, because I never see foreigners at the seafront. And if you see a touring bike like that, chances are it's a foreigner riding it, going on a long bike tour. So anyway, I went up to the guy, and I'm always a little bit hesitant about this. It's a little bit like if you happen to see Brad Pitt or whatever, Julia Roberts sitting in a coffee shop. Me personally, in a million years, I would never go up to them and say, hi, oh, I'm your biggest fan, I love this movie that you made, oh, can we take a picture together? I would never do that, because I don't want to bother these people. It's not what I would do. And of course, a cyclist is not in that category. But at the same time, I don't want to just walk up to this poor guy, hey, are you riding a bicycle? Because he would get that question all the time as a cyclist. How far do you ride every day? How far have you gone on this trip? How many countries have you been to? It's a very common conversation that you have as a long distance, cyclist. And I didn't want to be one of those people, one of thousands that he's had to deal with. But of course, I had a little bit more of a legitimate claim to have a conversation with him. For one thing, I had the story about thinking his bike was my bike. I thought that was amusing, so I told him that story. He clearly didn't think it was as amusing as I did. I don't think he quite understood what I was babbling about, but anyway, I told him that story. And I established the fact that I have occasionally gone on a long bicycle tour. So we are brethren. I have ridden bicycles long distances. I know a little bit about that world, and I thought maybe you'd want to talk about that perhaps. Maybe, go have a cup of coffee, have a beer somewhere, and we can just talk shop, as they say. So anyway, my instinct is not to talk to people like that. But in this case, I was feeling chatty, so I did go up to the guy and say, hey, is that your bicycle in there? That was my opening line. And then he said, yeah, that's my bike. Why? Like if a stranger approaches you like that, your instant reaction is like, why? It's like you just assume, okay, this is trouble. This guy's clearly insane. He's nutty. What's happening here? But anyway, we had a nice conversation, and then it is an interesting conversation to have with another, if you want to call them travelers, right? There can be a lot of landmines, and I'm very aware of them because I've been in this world for a long time, and I kind of dance around them. I don't want to set people off, and I avoid certain topics. So I'm trying to get a sense of who this guy is. You know, you kind of want to categorize people so you know who you're talking to and how to shape the conversation. And I got a pretty clear idea from this guy. I think I kind of, and of course you don't want to make assumptions either. You can be completely wrong. But he was, for example, he was older, probably my age, but you know, in his 60s, maybe late 60s. I'm 60, so am I in my 60s? But you know, maybe he would be later 60s. And he was clearly no nonsense. He's a tough guy from Australia. And I say that because he was shirtless, like he was just wearing his cycling shorts, nothing else, you know, bare feet, bare legs, bare chested, not wearing anything, drinking a beer out in public on a bench outside the hotel. And he's just sort of lying there, you know, drinking a beer, you know. So clearly he's a different kind of person from me, because everything he was doing in that situation, I would never do. I would never want to do it. Like, I'm not going to sit outside my hotel in Malaysia in particular, bare-chested, and then just sitting there drinking a beer out in public. You know, that's not something I would ever do. So that kind of told me something about who he was. And then when I was talking to him, he wasn't like, I mean, I would be like an eager puppy. You know, if someone came up to me, I sit up straight. I'm like, oh, yeah, that is my bike. You know, and I'm eager to chat, I'm eager to talk. And he was more like, yeah, that's my bike, whatever, why? You know, so okay, I got a bit of a tough guy here. Anyway, so that with that tough guy persona, I assumed that came with a lot of attitude. And in my experience, when you talk to other travelers with attitude, if you say anything about what you're doing that they won't do, that because they think it's silly or stupid, they will start talking about that topic. And so I don't know if this is making any sense at all, but I'm in this situation quite a bit. So for example, based on his bike, he had one pannier rack on the back. And the pannier rack was not a heavy duty model. In fact, it was a Topeak. And Topeak is like a really cheap consumer level. His bike was nice. His bike was a good, solid brand, you know, not super expensive, you know, but mid-range. It's not going to cost a nickel, but it's not going to cost $10,000 either. But it was a good bike. But the pannier rack was a cheapo one, and clearly not designed to carry a heavy load. So I assumed that this guy is traveling light. He's that kind of a guy. And now, of course, he's sitting out there in his cycling shorts and no shirt. So it's not like he's got a huge wardrobe. He's not carrying everything and the kitchen sink. He's a travel light kind of guy. And travel light travelers usually have an attitude about it. They want to talk about it all the time. It's sort of like talking to a vegan or something. And then if you mention, oh, I had this amazing sirloin steak last night, you know, that's a red flag to a bull. If you're talking to a vegan, you're setting yourself up for an hour-long lecture about how you shouldn't eat animals or something, right? You're just aware of that. And if you're talking with a travel light person, and then you walk past them with your big heavy backpack, yeah, that's like a red flag to a bull. They're going to focus in on it, and they're going to tell you, oh, why, you don't need to carry all that stuff. Look at me, I have such a you know, you're going to open yourself up to that conversation. And I assumed he was travel light, and I assumed he was against social media completely. So I'm not going to bring up YouTube. I'm not going to bring up Instagram or Facebook. If you mention Facebook, I'm pretty sure I'm going to set this guy off about how stupid Facebook is and how I never go on Facebook and I never opened a Facebook account. He's going to have to tell you all about him and how he doesn't have any social media. And that means, of course, he would also be anti-technology, where, you know, of course, he has to have a smartphone, because everybody does these days. If you don't have at least one smartphone, it's pretty difficult to survive, even if you're anti-social media, anti-technology. But I wouldn't have put it past this guy that he would have said, I don't even have a smartphone. And he would be very proud of that fact, right? And he'd have to tell you all about it. So when I'm in my conversation with him, I really tried to keep the conversation focused on him and not betray anything about me, really. If he asked, I would tell him, but I wasn't going to volunteer the fact that, anything about what I'm doing, about, having a YouTube channel, for example, shooting video, taking pictures, anything to do with that, because, I was curious about how he was traveling. Like, okay, A to B, where were you before? How did you know about this hotel? How did you book it? Like, do you do things online, this and this and that? And then to get all the way back to the beginning of my story, I can't remember why anymore, but I mentioned the fact that I have 2 smartphones. Something came up where there was like a barrier that I faced, and I got over the barrier because I had 2 smartphones. Or no, I don't think that's how it happened. I think I did it in a self-deprecating fashion. I think that's how it happened, and I often do that as well. I make fun of myself before the other person can make fun of me. And then I think I asked him whether he had a smartphone or how he used it, because I think we were talking about problems to do with booking hotels nowadays compared to how it was in the old days. For example, if you're staying in a hotel and you've got a hotel room and you want to stay one more day, you have to be very careful, because while you're in that room, that doesn't mean you can stay there one more day, because somebody can go on Agoda and book your room out from under you. So like if you don't book it yourself online, you go up to the front desk, oh, I'd like to extend by another couple of days. And like, oh, I'm sorry, sir. Somebody already booked your room. Like the fact that you have physical possession of your room no longer means anything. You have to have digital possession of your room. And I was kind of curious how he deals with a lot of these things. And I found out that he does have a phone, and I think he was saying something about how he doesn't like it and he doesn't like to use it, and I can't remember exactly what he said. But then I said something self-deprecating about myself, and I said, yeah, actually I have 2 phones. And I think I told him I have 3 phones, which I do. I have 3 phones. And then, of course, he looked at me in astonishment. It's like, why do you have 3 phones, And then I kind of talked about my history with smartphones, that, well, I had a very kind, generous YouTube subscriber to the Planet Doug channel who saw me struggling with this phone because I bought it specifically to edit videos. And I did a ton of research. This was back when I was in Mesot, and I bought this phone, a Xiaomi, and it's a mid-range phone, and for me it was an expensive phone that I bought. I usually buy like a cheaper phone, and then this one I spent more money because I wanted a phone that would be good enough to edit video. And then when I bought it, it was really disappointing. It did not work anywhere near as well as I had hoped it would work. And then maybe this Planet Doug subscriber heard me talking about that, but he happened to have extra phones, and then he bought the newest, best phone, and he still had the old phones. And rather than try to sell them, he gave them to me. He put them in a box. So this is the Samsung Galaxy Note 10 Plus, and this was my #1 phone for a long time, and it still is in a way. And he sent it to me, gave it to me for free. So then I had 2 phones. So at that point, it's like, well, like, what do you do? And I just kept this phone. I'm not going to get rid of it. And then this phone eventually took over a certain role in my life. It became my bedside phone. I use this for listening to podcasts, for setting alarms to wake up in the morning, for just casual, middle of the night, what time is it? I turn it on. I use it for all those sorts of things. And then this phone would be the one I use for video editing. And if I'm out in the street, out in the city somewhere, I want to check Google Maps, I would use this phone, because if it's stolen, it's not such a big deal, and I keep this one safe. So anyway, each phone played a role in my life. Then this same Planet Doug subscriber, perhaps seeing just how hugely important this phone was to me, he sent me a second phone. And this is the Samsung Galaxy S. I can't remember now. So then I have these two phones, and then they kind of each developed a special role in my life. And then they became really important to me. Like when I talked, I've already talked about how you have to have Grab, a new version of Grab on each phone. So each time I'd go to a new country, I would leave the SIM card from the old country in this phone, and then get a new SIM card in the new country for this phone, put Grab on this phone, and I can go back and forth, from one to the other, while keeping this as my podcasting phone. Anyway, I could go on and on and on. I've developed like a PhD dissertation about all the ways you can use two phones, and now 3 phones. And even battery life is a big one, because my Australian cyclist that I'm talking to, he started objecting. It's like, what a he wasn't being mean about it. I don't want to misrepresent him. He was just saying, like, why in the world would you have 3 phones? That's such a hassle. You have to carry around 3 phones. You've got to get 3 SIM cards, and then you have to charge up 3 phones. And then I kind of argued back a little bit, and he says, well, no, not really. Every time you go to a new country, you just get 1 SIM card, but now you have so many options about which phone to put the card in, and you can have your old SIM card still inserted, and now you have your new SIM card for the new country. And because you have 3 phones, you never turn this one on, right? So the battery, you don't charge them up all the time. Like, you never run into a situation where your phone runs out of battery power, because if this one happens to die, well, I just turn on this one, right? And if this one dies, I turn on this one. I've got 3 phones worth of battery life. Anyway, I let it slip when chatting with this guy that I have. Not only do I have 1 phone, I have 3 phones. And then I told him, well, in fact, I even have a laptop and a tablet on top of that, which probably, astonished him. But of course I have, the reason I have a laptop is YouTube. And then, the tablet is, plays a different role. And of course, all of that explains why my backpack is so heavy, particularly when you fold in 2 GoPros, a 360 camera, a mirrorless camera, tripod, hand grip, motorcycle grip, bicycle grip, etc., etc., etc. Anyway, it was a lot of fun for me to meet this guy, and I never saw him again. He left really early the next morning. He was cycling all the way to Malacca the next morning, spend a couple of nights in Malacca, and then he was going to Singapore, and then that was the end of his journey. And then from there, he was going to fly back to Australia. I could have talked to him for hours. I really would have enjoyed it. But again, yeah, it's an interesting conversation to have with another, traveler, and then someone who's older. I've been on this planet a long time. I've had a lot of conversations, and I've had so many conversations that they start to fall into categories. You start talking to someone, and you can almost feel that the conversation is going to fall into this comfortable pattern. And sometimes I'm just not in the mood for it. It's like, yeah, I don't need to have that conversation again. And when someone my age meets someone of a similar age who has done a relatively large amount of traveling, the conversation can easily fall into a trap where we start talking about how it was so much better in the old days, how everything has changed. And he will have 20 stories already lined up to demonstrate how, oh, he went to Koh Samui 30 years ago, and he just recently went to Koh Samui again, and it's been totally ruined. You know, I could counter with my version of that, you know, how I went to Boracay 30 years ago and what it was like, and how I would never go to Boracay now because of all the huge development. You know, now it's basically a tourist trap, and oh, you should have been to Boracay 30 years ago. It was so much better back then. And then we can lament all the changes. You know, we each would have 20, 30, 100 stories that we can trot out, that we've trotted out 100 times in the past. And the conversation could go down that path, but it can be quite boring. The conversation can also settle into the groove of technical and logistical problems about getting visas for different countries. That's another conversation that can happen. And you can easily fall into that path. And now you're exchanging stories about all of your visa horror stories. You know, there are like 10 different conversations you can have. And when I meet someone like this, in particular a fellow cyclist, I'm aware of all of these conversations. And I'm just too tired to have them all over again. So I try to steer the conversation away from the trigger words that will send us down that conversational path. I want to have a new conversation, a unique one, that one that I've never had before. And so yeah, you end up doing a lot of thinking during your conversation, and I'm trying to be very careful not to steer our conversational car down a familiar path. You know, I wanted it to go down a new path. And but anyway, I enjoyed it very much, a short chat with this guy. And yeah, getting some of his story. I would have loved to have heard a lot more, and I would have loved to see him, you know, pack up his bicycle in the morning and, you know, see him off. But he was saying he was going to leave at like 5:30 in the morning when it was cool and you know, not traffic on the road and stuff like that. But yeah, that was a very interesting encounter for me. I haven't had a chat with a foreigner like that for a really long time. One last thing about this conversation, which I thought was quite amusing, and I've run into this in the past, and I've seen other people run into it as well, where you meet someone new, and you're talking to them, and you find a common topic. Like for him and I, of course, there was an obvious one: bike touring. He does bike touring. I've done bike touring. We can talk about that. And you may want to start like bragging about yourself. You know, you want to talk about some of the best bike trips you've gone on. And, you know, it's like a little bit of a competition, you know, who has gone to the craziest country, the wildest country, the most dangerous, who's the more hardcore cyclist. You know, I don't do that. You know, like in this case, I never talked about any of my bike trips because I didn't want to. I'm bored with my life, to be honest. I'm bored with talking about what I've done in the past. I want to hear about him. He's new to me. I know what I've done. I have no idea what he's done. So I kept steering the conversation. I want to ask him questions. I don't want him to ask me. So I was very careful to steer all of it away from me and focus on him. But in general, this can happen, and then the conversation is over and you go away, and then you find out that the person you were talking to is a world famous cyclist who is like a legend, right? Everybody knows this guy. And then you feel like such an idiot. Maybe some technical issue about bike touring comes up, and then I start pontificating and I start talking about it. Oh yeah, you know, for spokes, you got to get this kind of spoke. They're heavy duty, but you don't get this rim. You got to get this rim. And, you know, I just go on and on and on, telling this guy everything, all my opinions about bike touring. And then you walk away from that conversation, and then you find out that the man you were talking to is a legend in the cycling world. You know, he's been riding around the world for 45 years. He's written 15 books on the topic. He goes on talk shows. And then you feel like an idiot because you just spent an hour telling this guy how he should go bike touring when it turns out he's like a world famous cycling celebrity, you know. And, you know, can you imagine being out there and you run into some stranger on the beach somewhere, and then you start chatting and you're really interested in cooking and food, and you go on and on and on about all your knowledge about cooking and how you do this and you do that, and this is what you should do and you shouldn't do. And then you leave that conversation and you find out that, well, this was Gordon Ramsay, you know, or some world famous chef, and you had no idea, right? And now you feel like an idiot, and the other person just let you talk and talk and talk and make a fool out of yourself. So I was talking with this guy about a little bit about bike touring, and then I stopped and I made a joke about it. And I said, okay, wait a second, you know, before we talk about anything else, I have to ask you, like, are you famous? Because he looked like such a hardcore cyclist. Like I said, you know, just even the way he was sitting, the no shirt, and he was whip thin. There was not a quarter of an ounce of fat on this guy. He was like rail thin. He was nothing but wiry muscles. He looked like he has been out on a bike or hiking through the Sahara Desert for the last 50 years. I mean, he looked, you know, weathered by the sun, and there was nothing left of him but muscle. And he just looked like a guy who could have been cycling for the last half century or something. So again, I kind of stopped and I went, okay, so like before I make a fool out of myself, like, are you famous or something? Like, are you well known in the cycling world as a legendary figure? You write books about it and everybody knows who you are, and you've ridden more tens of thousands of kilometers than anyone in history. And then he laughed and said, no, I'm nobody. You know, I just ride a bike. So okay, that's good. But I had to make that clear first, you know, before I made a fool of myself. Because yeah, for all I knew, he was a legend in the cycling world. You know, could have been a big cycling celebrity. He could have, I don't know, for all I knew, he was a 4-time winner of the what's the big marathon in France? I can't even think of it right now. The Tour de France. Yeah, like maybe he's won the Tour de France 5 times. I don't know. Anyway, we had to clear that up before I could continue the conversation. But anyway, I enjoyed that very much. I don't tend to run into other Westerners like that lately that I can have that kind of a conversation with. And to run into another, you know, cyclist was really quite interesting for me. So yeah, I enjoyed that quite a bit. So, as I mentioned at the beginning, Itchy Boots came out with a new video. I've watched it, enjoyed it very much, and this one was called "This is an Absolute Nightmare, Trying to Cross Cameroon, Congo," Season 7, Episode 80. So I guess Season 7 is her Africa season, and this is the 80th episode of crossing Africa. Quite interesting. And the key feature of this video is that her motorcycle finally fell into the river. And in a recent BTS video, I was actually talking about that. I was talking about one of her videos. She was putting her motorcycle onto another canoe, rickety barge, a boat, something. And I was talking about how she's had to do this so many times. She's had to cross so many rivers. And every single time, I'm holding my breath because I keep thinking that canoe is really tippy. And at some point, you know, the boat is going to tip and the motorcycle is going to go into the river. Like, I'm surprised it hasn't happened yet. And it happened. It finally happened. But it's like, in a way, you could say she got lucky, because when I was talking about this happening, I always assumed it would happen in the middle of the river. So, you know, there's the canoe, you know, there's the motorcycle balanced on the canoe. It's got ropes over it, whatever they've done. And then they get out into the middle of the river and the canoe tips and the motorcycle sinks under the surface and is just gone. Then she could lose the motorcycle entirely, because how are they going to get it out, right? That's what I was expecting to happen, and I was surprised it hadn't happened yet. And I kept waiting and waiting and waiting for it to happen, and this time it finally happened. But apparently it happened on shore. So they just put the motorcycle on the canoe, and they hadn't pushed off from shore yet, or maybe they were just pushing off, and then the canoe tipped. So the motorcycle went into the water upside down, but it was still shallow enough that these guys were able to pick it up or drag it out of the water, whatever they did. And I don't know exactly what happened or how it went into the water or how they got it out, because, oh, this is so crazy, there was no video of it. And this is something else that I just talked about. Actually, I just talked about it a couple of different times, where Itchy Boots uses a 360 camera and a GoPro. And I was talking about how she got so much really fascinating, like candid video because of her 360 camera. It really shows the special ability of that camera. She doesn't really use it as a 360 camera. She just sort of uses it as sort of an eye in the sky, kind of a camera that can always be running in the background and filming everything around it. Though I don't even know if she uses the 360 setting. She might be using just the one camera setting, the single lens setting. But anyway, it's mounted there on her handlebars. And then in past videos, whenever she puts the motorcycle onto a canoe and all these men are going to be grabbing her motorcycle and carrying it, she turns on the 360 camera and it records sort of this candid video of all the men, you know, manhandling her motorcycle. Like Itchy Boots, what I'm saying is she's not holding a camera and filming them. She just turns on the 360 camera and lets it run during that whole sequence. And then she ends up with all this interesting video. And then when it's running as she's riding through the mud, and then she tips and falls into the mud, more often than not, the 360 camera records that. You know, she's not, you know, filming with her GoPro and getting everything, but the 360 camera, since it's always running in the background, it captures these really important moments. And I talked about how interesting that is to have a 360 camera. But in this case, for me, the most dramatic thing that has happened on her entire trip, when her motorcycle finally falls into the river, this is the one time her 360 camera wasn't running. So she has no video of it. And it's even worse because, again, I think for the very first time, she was separated from her motorcycle. They kind of talked to her, you know, about, okay, the motorcycle is going to be really heavy, so it's better for you to go in another canoe. So they had two canoes. And one canoe had her motorcycle and all of her luggage, and then the other canoe contained her and then the boat guy. And I found that a little bit weird too. Yeah. Anyway, Itchy Boots went across the river in her canoe, but her motorcycle and all her luggage stayed behind. So as she was crossing the river, she was assuming the other canoe would also start to move, but it didn't. And then she was like looking behind her, getting a little bit worried, of course, because she's separated from all her stuff. And then she's, you know, like, where are those guys? Where are those guys? And they got to the other side of the river, and then she's waiting for the motorcycle to cross, and it never showed up. And she got more and more and more worried. Obviously, she might be thinking, oh, they're stealing my motorcycle, you know, all my luggage, a real possibility, or something even worse happened. And then she talked to her guy and says, no, I think there's a big problem. We got to go back. We got to go back. And the guy didn't want to go back. He kept saying, oh, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. But she insisted, and then they went back. And then when she got back to the other side of the river, she saw her motorcycle on shore and all the men were crowded around it. And she thought, oh, something happened. And then she learned that the motorcycle fell in the water, and they had already taken it out of the water. And then, of course, she tried to start the motorcycle, and it wouldn't start. So, interesting story for me, because as I said, I talked about this at length and how I was so surprised it hadn't happened yet, but it did finally happen. But as with many of these things, it could have been worse because it fell in the water when it was still relatively shallow. I still don't know whether it was submerged. Itchy Boots I find frustrating at times because she doesn't tell the whole story. And I need the details. My brain is just, I'm obsessed with details. So the fact that her motorcycle fell in the water, I want to know everything. I want to know how, I want to know when, I want to know why, I want to know what, who. I need all the details. And she did ask them, like, was the motorcycle just on its side or did it go upside down? And they told her upside down, but she didn't say, okay, was it completely under the water? And if it was completely submerged, how did they get it out? Did they like turn it around and then roll it out through the water? Or did they drag it upside down through the mud? Or did they pick it? Like, was it attached to ropes on the canoe? So, and then it fell over and it was still attached to the canoe under the canoe? Or, I don't know, like, because it wasn't captured on video, the actual details of what happens we'll never know. And Itchy Boots didn't really tell the whole story in her video, so I don't really know all the details that I want to know. And in the end, it kind of worked out. I guess, again, Itchy Boots didn't break it down to exact details, but I think she put the motorcycle in the canoe, again, crossed the river, got it to the other side, because she'd already gone through immigration and customs on one side, so she couldn't go back. So she only could go forward, and she wanted to get across because the immigration office was going to close, things like that. And then, so she got across the river, and on the other side of the river, then they really started to work on the motorcycle. I do wonder about the things that happen to her and people do for her. Would they have done it for me? Like, if I were in that situation, my motorcycle went into the river and we crossed, what would have happened to me? I do think about that, and I'm curious, because she got to the other side and the immigration office was there, like a little hut kind of thing, just a wooden shack. But technically, the immigration office was closed, right? It was way too late in the day. The sun had gone down, everything was shut. So even though everything was shut, she still managed to go to immigration. I think she got stamped into the country. They took care of all the paperwork, and the immigration people called a mechanic for her. A mechanic came, and then they spent like 2 or 3 hours working on her motorcycle at the side of the river. They dismantled everything, took all the pieces off, and they eventually got the motorcycle to run. And then she was able to drive her motorcycle in the dark to the next city up the road and get to a hotel. And then they opened the door of the hotel. It's probably past midnight by this point, I don't really know. And then she found a place to stay at this hotel. Put me into her Itchy Boots, I'm pretty sure I'd be stuck at the river. I can't say that for sure, but somehow I'm pretty sure that by the time I got my motorcycle across the river, they would have said, immigration is closed. They would have went, closed. And then everybody would have walked away, and that would have been the end of it. And I would have been stuck there all by myself. I don't know. Maybe a good Samaritan would have stepped up and helped me out, but I'm pretty sure I would have been there for the night at least. And I'd have to wait until the next day, and then I would go to immigration and get stamped into the country. And then they would look at me and go, all right, you're all done, away you go. And then I'd be on my own. I'd have to talk to somebody and say, oh, can you help me? Because I probably wouldn't have a working smartphone yet, because you don't have a local SIM card, right? You'd be basically stuck, and I'd have to find someone and say, is there a mechanic here? Can you phone a mechanic for me? Can you get them to come? That sort of thing. I think it would have been a little bit more challenging for me, but Itchy Boots, with her, warm, bubbly personality and her friendliness, I think people would be more willing to help her. And then I think she just people just did things for her naturally. But I am curious about that. What would have happened if it were me in her Itchy Boots? And things would have worked out in the end, of course, but I think it would have taken a little bit longer. And I would be there overnight, of course, but of course I would have had a tent, and I would have had a stove and make some coffee and drink some hot coffee and turned it into a bit of an adventure. And I do think about this all the time, the whole YouTube shooting video thing. It does surprise me that, like, the way she does it sometimes, because I know, again, in her shoes, I'd be filming the whole time. Like, she told the story later. So, for example, when she got to a town, she found a hotel, she stayed in the hotel, she got her motorcycle washed and cleaned, she took a shower, and then the next day, or the day after that, she sat in her hotel room, just like I'm doing here, turned on the camera, and then she told the story about what had happened. She told it in retrospect, because she didn't shoot any video at the time when it was happening. And I don't know. I know I would have shot video at the time. Like, she was in the canoe, she crossed the river, and as she said, now she was really, really worried about what happened to her motorcycle. At that time, I would have done it on camera. Like, I would have had a GoPro running at that time, and I would have said, I don't know what's going on. I crossed in my canoe, we're waiting for the motorcycle, and it's been 35 minutes and it still hasn't shown up. Something terrible might have happened. And then going back across the river, I would have been filming, and then when I got to the edge of the river and I see my motorcycle covered in mud, dripping wet, and everybody's panicking, I would have filmed it and said, oh, what happened? What happened? And then I would have turned the camera on. The worst thing ever, finally happened. My motorcycle fell in the river. Like, I would have filmed the events as they were unfolding, or at least I would have felt the pressure to do so. Like, if I was, posting videos about my journey and I knew there were millions of people out there, waiting for the next video, I would feel pressure from that audience out there. Okay, get video of this, because it is the most dramatic thing yet that has happened on this journey. So I'm wondering, maybe logistically she didn't, because maybe she'd packed away all her cameras. Like, maybe she didn't even have one with her. Because all her luggage was on the canoe with the motorcycle, and maybe all her GoPros, she just put them away for the night because the sun had gone down. It was dark. So those are all very valid reasons, for putting your cameras away, and you're kind of done for the day. As I said earlier, she didn't even have the 360 camera running on the motorcycle. So yeah, maybe she had no access to cameras. Who knows? She doesn't, talk about that in detail. Obviously, it should go without saying, but I'll say it. I'm not saying all this as a criticism of how Itchy Boots makes her videos. Who am I to offer any criticism at all? My last video was about eating noodles in Medan, and 500 people might watch a part of that video. So obviously I have nothing to say to someone who makes videos that millions of people watch, no matter what she posts. So yeah, we're in entirely different leagues, but same with Bald and Bankrupt, all the videos that I talk about. It's more in the sense of discussion, as opposed to criticism, because I do find it interesting when someone like Bald and Bankrupt or Itchy Boots posts a video and I see things in the video that it feels like nobody else sees. Like I'll scan the comments, and there might be 5,000 comments, and every single comment is just lavishing and heaping praise on everything they say and everything they've ever done and everything they ever might think about doing. And I wonder, where are my YouTube peeps out there? I get a strange haircut and I'll hear about it. I saw a really funny comment this morning where, my noodle video where I took photos of the noodles and I did this little, smartphone pan, and the comment I got was, well, that would have been a lot better if you'd taken the spoon out of the noodles. The funny thing is that when I was taking pictures of my noodles, I knew somebody would think that. Like I'd already put the spoon into the noodles, and then I thought, oh, I should probably take the spoon out to take the picture. But I left the spoon in because I felt like if I took the spoon out and put it on the table, somebody would see that and they would leave a comment, oh, you shouldn't do that because the table is really dirty. You should leave your spoon in the noodles. I could hear somebody criticizing me for where I put the spoon. So I left the spoon in the noodles, and then I did my little video pan, and I get a comment from someone saying, wow, it's not a very good picture. You should have taken the spoon out. So people notice things. Like people are hyper aware of details. So then I see something like an Itchy Boots video where her motorcycle falls in the river, and her video has no video about the motorcycle falling in the river. I figured somebody would at least mention that in the comments, but nobody ever does. Like it's nothing but praise. And then what I do is in my head, I look at one of those videos that gets 3 million views, and then I look at, my noodle video, which will get 500 views at the most. And, I start thinking about, okay, in that situation, how would I film? And my instincts are probably completely wrong because, everything I do is wrong. It feels like I should get some more wisdom from Seinfeld and then the George episode, the opposite. George was lamenting how everything he's ever done has been wrong. And Jerry points out that, well, if your instincts are always wrong, where everything you feel you should do is wrong, then the opposite must be right. So just do the opposite of everything you think you should do, and everything will work out better, right? So I feel like that's what I should do, But of course, in my case, you can't win because you leave the spoon in the noodles. That's wrong, because the picture is no good. You put the spoon on the table. That's wrong because, it's unhygienic and you're going to get sick because you put the spoon on the table. Everything like that is wrong. And my noodle video is really kind of funny because I'm looking at the menu of all the noodles, and I have no idea what any of them are. I don't know how to eat them. They look like bowls of noodles to me. And I just ordered them, and I'm expecting the noodles to come in broth, like noodle soup. And then it came without any broth. But I also ordered dumplings. I thought the dumplings were in with the noodles, but they came in a separate bowl filled with broth. So I'm like, I don't really know what's going on here. And I just took my bowl of broth and dumplings and dumped them into the noodles because I want broth with my noodles. But as someone pointed out to me, I had ordered dry noodles. They're supposed to come that way, and you eat them dry. So I can't even eat noodles properly. Like, if I can't even eat noodles properly, how in the world am I going to ride a motorcycle across Africa and film it properly? It's just not in the cards. But anyway, that's how I approach these videos. For me, it's more like a video discussion because I'm really interested in the behind the scenes, logistics and things like that. And in keeping with that, I think I'm going to move on to another Itchy Boots video, and then maybe that's the only other video I'll talk about because I'm going to run out of time here. I said I was going to talk about a whole bunch of other videos, but maybe I'll save those for the next BTS and just stay, in on the Itchy Boots train for now. We'll see. And I want to do this because there was another Itchy Boots video posted before this one that I haven't talked about yet. And there was one very interesting element to that video I find absolutely fascinating, and I want to know so much more about it. This video is called, the video is called, "He Says My International Driver's License is Not Correct," and CAMEROON. And the thumbnail is a picture of her speaking with a man. He's not in uniform. He's just like a local guy, but he's at some sort of a checkpoint. Could have been customs, immigration, who knows. And on the thumbnail says, "Standing my ground." And there's something really interesting about this video, because the whole video and all the comments is about her standing up to corruption. And I've been talking a lot about corruption in my videos lately, ever since she posted her video about the Nigerian police officer asking for money and how he got fired. And that video sparked a big discussion about corruption in Nigerian police force and checkpoints and things like that. And here, this is very clearly corruption. And I recognize it as such because I had so many similar experiences on my bike trip through Guinea. And when you're dealing with police officers or officials like this, you simply can't win, because what they do is they ask for your papers and then they just invent an infraction. And the whole idea is they invent an infraction, and then of course there is a fine you can pay. You know, there's a problem with your papers, but if you just give me, you know, an on-the-spot fine, we can take care of this matter right now, you know. And it's just basically asking for a bribe. So like if you're in Guinea and you're riding a bicycle, the guy will stop you and say, you know, "Where is your permit for the bicycle?" And there is no such permit, obviously. But he will say, "Oh, you don't have a permit? Ooh, that's bad. That's very bad. You know, I might have to arrest you and take you to jail. We're going to kick you out of the country. But, you know, if you pay, you can buy the form now. Like if you pay for the permit and it costs $20 or something, then you can go on your way." But then if you happen to have a permit for your bicycle and you give the guy the permit, he will look at it and say, "Oh, there's no stamp on it. Like, where is the stamp?" And it's like, "Oh, now you have to pay a fine because your paper is not correct. It does not have the stamp." But if you go by that guy the next day and now you have a stamp on the paper, you know, he will look at it and say, "Oh, you know, oh, the stamp was supposed to be in blue ink. Yours is in yellow ink. And so it's not acceptable." So no matter what you do, you can't win, because they will invent another infraction until you finally pay them. And to, you know, in Guinea, I never paid. I never paid any of these guys. All I did was, I did exactly what Itchy Boots did. I just waited. I stood my ground, and then I would wait and just not pay them until they got impatient. They got tired of me. And then they would just go looking for easier prey. And then they would finally just say, "All right, get out of here. Go, 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 go." Right? So you can stand your ground if you have a lot of time. You know, if you can wait them out, you can get away with it, right? So in this case, this guy asked to see everything. I knew something was coming because you're watching the video and the guy looks dodgy. And then he says, "Oh, can I see your this? Like, can you show me your, you know, your passport? Okay, here's your passport." He looks over the passport. "Oh, do you have insurance? Do you have your customs import, you know, carnet de passage?" Itchy Boots gets that out, gives it to him. And he says, "Oh, do you have insurance?" And now Itchy Boots has to go into one of her pannier bags and, you know, open it, get out a waterproof container, open that, go through her big stack of papers, you know, find the insurance documents for CAMEROON, take those out, hand them to the guy. So now the guy's got like handfuls of her documents, and he's clearly just making trouble. And then he goes over all those papers. Then he's, oh, do you have your driver's license? And Itchy Boots, you can see Itchy Boots is getting a little bit impatient. She's like, oh, come on, like, how many documents do you need to see? But she gets out her driver's license, hands it to him. He looks at it and it's like, oh, no, 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 this is no good. You need a license for Cameroon. And she says, yes, I have that as well. She gets her international driver's license, hands it to the guy. It's a big paper, several pages of papers, whatnot. It's her international driver's license, hands it to the guy, and he looks at it and he says, oh, there's no signature. Who signed this? So now that was all the other papers, he couldn't find anything wrong with them. And on this one, her international driver's license, he decided, okay, this is where I'm going to ask for my bribe. And he looks at that and he sees, maybe he's never even seen one before, but he focuses on it and he doesn't see a signature. So he says, oh, who signed it? Nobody signed it. There's no stamp. There's no signature. So this is not good for Cameroon. And he's clearly wanting money. And he's hoping Itchy Boots will be intelligent enough to understand that, okay, I just have to give him a bribe. And then she's supposed to say, oh, I didn't realize that was a problem. And is there a way we can take care of this? And, oh, maybe, if you give me, $10 or whatever the local currency is, I think we can, that will be fine. You have to pay a fine. And you pay, I have to give you a ticket for $20. And then here's the ticket. And on you go. And in Guinea, as I talked about before, they had a very interesting system where every police officer had a blank form. It was like a notepad, and you could just write down the infraction and the amount you have to pay. And the whole thing is like a facade. You're just pretending that this is a ticket. And the guy would just say, oh, no signature on driver's license, and that's a $20 ticket. And he'd peel it off and give it to you as if it is an official document, right? But the whole thing is just a play. You're just acting out, paying a bribe, and pretending it's real. Anyway, so that's what this guy was expecting. And then Itchy Boots just stood her ground and said, no. Like, she even said, she let a little bit of her irritation come out. And she said to the guy something like, come on, everything I've given you is correct. My papers are correct. And I really admired her for that, because she didn't take the bait. The guy said, there's no signature. And the obvious response would be, well, this paper doesn't require a signature. That's not the way. And then once you take that bait, you're hooked. And then you end up going around and around about, does this form need a signature or not? And then Itchy Boots refused to play that game. And she just said, it's correct. You asked for all my papers. You have all my papers. All my papers are correct. And then the guy would say, oh, but you have to have a signature. Who signed it? And she said, it is correct. Everything I gave you is correct. And she just said that over and over and refused to go off into the weeds, with some kind of crazy debate about what kind of stamp, what kind of signature, what authority is allowed to sign it. Obviously that's just going to be nonsense. So she just kept saying, everything is right. That is an international driver's license. I've used it in countries all over the world. It is valid. It is correct. There's nothing wrong with it. She refused to get into debates about the signature, the lack of a signature, who has the authority to sign it, who doesn't, So she just said, everything is correct. And then eventually she just got her papers back and said to the guy, everything is correct. I'm going to get on my motorcycle and I'm leaving. And then she just left. So that's what happened. And everybody in the comments, of course, is praising her to the stars for standing her ground against corruption, with the idea that you should not give in to any of this corruption. The Nigerian officer who asked for money, she didn't give him money. This guy's asking for a bribe, she refused. She's doing the right thing. But there's something I found very interesting. After a drink of coffee, I'll tell you what it is. So as Itchy Boots told the story and gave more background, it sounded like the real reason she didn't pay a bribe is that she didn't have any bribe money left. She didn't have any money left. It sounded to me like she stood her ground, not as a fight against corruption, but she stood her ground because she didn't have a choice and she was running out of money. And she told the story. She said that, you know, she had to go through so many immigration offices, customs offices, because she's going through all of these border things. Like, to get into this country, she had to exit immigration and customs, enter immigration and customs, and then do it all over again, immigration and customs. And she said every single time she had to pay money. And she said the money was just going straight into their pockets. That every immigration office, oh, you need this stamp, you need this form, she has to pay. Customs, oh, you need this, you have to pay. And she wasn't really clear about the details, but my memory of listening to her tell the story is that she paid a bribe in every single office that she went through. Every immigration office, every customs office involved papers, signatures, stamps, documents, and at some point she gave them money. She would say, oh, okay, there's a fee for this. You know, there's a processing fee for this. There's a tax for this. And then she would just pay them over and over, and these were all just made up fees, made up taxes. And they're all basic, and she was aware of it, that she was paying a bribe in every one of these offices. And in this case, going through this country, circumstances had built up to the point where she was running out of money. She wasn't able to get enough money, and then she was paying so many bribes and had to pay so many people that by the time she got to this guy, she didn't have any money left. And now she stood her ground. And again, in the theory was, according to the comments and the video in general, she was standing her ground because she's, you know, a bulwark against corruption. She's fighting back against corruption. But it sounds like the real reason is she just didn't have any bribe money left. And in fact, she had paid bribes in all the immigration and customs offices already. So for me, that begs the question of how long has this been going on? I mean, like going all the way back to getting into Morocco, and then she rode her rode her motorcycle through all these African countries. It's like border crossing after border crossing after border crossing. Was she in fact paying bribes every single time? Like, which countries did she have to pay a bribe? Which countries did she not have to pay a bribe? How much were the bribes, and who did she pay, and how did it happen? Or is this the first time? Was it only in the last 2 countries in West Africa where she suddenly found herself paying bribes? Or did I misunderstand what she was saying? I'd really like to know, you know? So that's what I found really interesting about this video. And I want to know more about it. There's a really good air conditioner in this room, brand new, really powerful. So yeah, it's nice. But it's actually getting a bit chilly in here. So yeah, I have to turn it off and drink some more warm coffee. I just watched the opening to the Itchy Boots video again. It's really quite amusing because she always structures her video with a little bit of a, you know, coming up in this video segment, and then her introduction, and then the video itself. And then she has this point where the guy is like, he slaps the form. I love that little scene. He's holding the package of documents for the international driver's license, and he slaps it like, the stamp, the signature, who signed it? And then Itchy Boots said, come on, you're making this up. You know, he like just accused him straight out and said, come on, I know you're making all of this up. You're just inventing this problem. And yeah, it was like very upfront about it. But an interesting part of this story too is that next in her journey is when the motorcycle falls into the river, and then she got the mechanic came and worked on her motorcycle for a few hours and got it running again. And then as she told her story, she said, well, she didn't even have any money to pay him and had to tell the guy, okay, I can give you a little bit of money now, but I have to go to the next town, get money from an ATM. So give me your phone number. When I have money, I'll call you and you can come to my hotel or we can meet somewhere and I can pay you for what you did. So it was pretty clear she had run out of money. She didn't have any money left. So when she was talking to this guy about her driver's permit and he was asking for money, you know, she didn't even have any left. She might have had a little bit, but she knew she had to keep it for the river crossing. So she was done. And as she explained it, I think, you know, reading between the lines, she had paid many bribes already. In every office, she had to pay a bribe, and she just ran out of money. So this guy asking for his bribe, and she just, you know, came to the end of her wallet, and she had no choice but to stand her ground, right? So she kind of turned a necessity into a virtue. But I am curious, when she hinted at paying bribes in all these offices, I want to know that story. Like, you know, how does that happen? The nuances of there you are, you're sitting there. Every time she goes into one of these immigration and customs offices, she's always laughing and smiling and saying hello to everyone. She comes out and she's laughing and smiling, and for all the world, she looks like nothing bad happened. And then she rides away into the new country, and then she does her signature, you know, welcome to, which I must admit, I mute that every time. I don't know why. You know, welcome to in the new country. I hit the mute button. For some reason, it annoys me when she does that. But that's just a pet peeve of mine. And it's so loud. It's like, yes, that's going to be so loud. So I hit the mute button. But again, she's so happy. But again, if it was me filming and I just went through immigration, customs, and I had to pay a bribe 4 times to get across every single border, I'd be talking about it. I mean, I would tell that story because to me that's a very interesting thing, and I wouldn't be happy about it because it's exhausting. I like things to be out in the open and straightforward. You know, if the guy said to me, listen, I'm a corrupt immigration officer, give me $5, you're on your way. You know, I can handle that. But the whole pretending it's not a bribe, pretending that there's a problem with my papers, you know, we have to have this long discussion. It's exhausting, you know. Just tell me you want money, and then maybe I don't want to pay you, and I'll tell you no, and then we can deal. I like things to be out in the open. I like things to be clear, you know. So all of this spy versus spy discussion, you know, just it's exhausting for me. So, but if I went, like I said, if I went through that situation, I would be tired, I would be annoyed, and I would think it was interesting, and I would tell the story. But it sounds like she's been paying a lot of bribes, but just never mentioned it before until this point. So I do find that kind of interesting. I decided to tell a couple more YouTube stories just to deal with them now while they're fresh in my mind. And this one is from Simon Wilson, and the video is called, not surprisingly, Inside the World's Biggest Slum in Pakistan. And as I explained, Simon Wilson, he was in Pakistan with Bald and Bankrupt and Backpacker Ben, and they started in Karachi, and then the 3 of them kind of went out filming together. They went to a beach. They went into this local neighborhood called Orangi that once upon a time was called, you know, the biggest shanty town in the world. It is not anymore, but that's what they choose to talk about in their videos. All 3 of them went there, and then all 3 of them took a train up to Quetta, and then they tried to go to some other town by bus, but the military wouldn't let them go there. They couldn't get permits to go there, and then the military put them on a bus back to Karachi. And so anyway, Simon Wilson was with them for much of this journey, and I've already watched all the videos from Bald and Bankrupt and Backpacker Ben from Pakistan. And I was waiting for Simon Wilson's video just to see everything from his point of view. And there weren't a lot of surprises, though in Backpacker Ben's video, I got the impression that Simon Wilson was there doing one of his normal like gimmick videos or a stunt video where, you know, he rolled the dice and the dice said he had to go to Pakistan and do A, B, or C, like some kind of a challenge, something to do with sampling street food. That's what I thought was going on, but it turns out not at all. He was just there and he just shot a regular travel vlog. So he went around with Backpacker Ben. Backpacker Ben was shooting his video about what he was doing there. And then Simon Wilson just did the same thing. They were just walking around together much of the time, and he was filming. And then, you know, they went up and down the beach, and then they went to a food street, and they rode on a bus, and they did this and they did that. And that was the whole video. There was no challenge involved. There was no street food involved. There was really no structure to the video, which kind of surprised me because my impression of him is that his whole thing for his YouTube channel is to do challenges and have a gimmick in each video. But this one didn't have a gimmick or a challenge. I guess people just said to him, you know, you really should go to Pakistan, and then he finally went there. And there isn't a lot to say about his video. It was fairly typical, very similar to Backpacker Ben's and Bald and Bankrupt, like really talking about how dangerous everything is. And we went to Orangi, which is, you know, the worst slum in the world, and look how horrible it is, and look at all the garbage. And I don't know, they made a really big meal out of all of that, and none of it really rang true to me. It felt like a lot of self promotion about, look at me, I'm in this crazy place in Pakistan, rather than giving an honest appraisal of what he sees around me. And then he has a lot of encounters with people the same way that Bald and Bankrupt does, where he speaks really loud, Simon Wilson. And I was wondering about that because of the camera gear he uses, and I'll talk about that at the end. But he speaks really loud. He's got a sharp, clear voice. He's like shouting. And then he would run into a local person, and then he would shout something at them in English, and the person has no idea what he just said, but then he would just kind of breeze right past it, you know. So they went to McDonald's, and there was a guy, like a security guard out front of McDonald's carrying a gun, and then a big gun. And then like Simon Wilson walked up to the guy with his camera. Oh, look at that, that's a really big gun. Yeah, what kind of a gun is that? And the guy has no idea what he's talking about. Like, why are you pointing a camera at me? And he just says nothing. And then Simon, oh, cool, cool, cool. Oh, big gun. So he basically has all these shouting conversations with local people that never respond because they don't know what he's saying. And yet that somehow gets into his video as a weird sort of natural flow. It's almost like the local people are props for some kind of a stand-up routine that he's doing, you know. And again, I watch that as someone who shoots YouTube videos, and I try to imagine, okay, yeah, I could never do that. And I always end up in really awkward situations where I'm meeting a local person, and then I don't know what they're saying. They don't know what I'm saying. And when I listen to myself on my own video, I sound so awkward and so uncomfortable. And I keep thinking, oh, I wish I didn't sound like that. Why am I so awkward and uncomfortable? But then I realize, well, they get around that problem by just ignoring it altogether. And they just walk through the streets and, you know, shouting things at people and not even caring whether there's any kind of communication taking place. And like, okay, that's how they get around it. But I couldn't do that, you know. And a lot of the people they talk to, they look like they could be offended. I mean, again, we're talking about Pakistan here. And, you know, you could get away with this in Indonesia because Indonesians, you know, Sumatrans, basically, because that's the only place I've been for a long time. They're into it. You know, you go in there with your stand-up comedy, they'll come right back at you. You know, they love to get on the camera and, you know, shout things back and forth, have fun, tease, make jokes. You know, But Pakistan, I don't know whether you want to do it there. You know, they talked a lot about how, you know, there are security concerns. People with cameras are considered to be suspicious. Apparently, Simon Wilson was accused of being a BBC journalist, and people didn't want to talk to him because they don't like the BBC. And then, I don't know, I'd be a little bit more cautious with my cameras and my shouting at people, you know, elderly people who look like, you know, elders of their community with large beards and things. I wouldn't want to annoy them or, you know, shout at them. You know, I really wouldn't. But it's kind of what Simon Wilson was doing all through here. And there was this weird thing about food, which jumped out at me about Bald and Bankrupt and Backpacker Ben, where they didn't dare eat any local food. Like, they just refused, and they were quite upfront about it. They just basically said, "Are you kidding me? Are you joking, mate? I wouldn't touch any of that." And I thought that was kind of odd because, you know, if you are a popular travel vlogger, part of the persona you want to build up is that you're willing to try anything. You know, you're out there getting into the culture and trying the local food. I mean, that's part of the ideal for a travel vlogger, is to sample the local food. And these guys, both of them, extremely popular YouTubers, you know, Bald and Bankrupt with his, you know, millions of views for every video. Simon Wilson, Backpacker Ben, not in his league, but hundreds of thousands, if not millions of views as well. And yet they're quite upfront about it. Yeah, we're going to go to Pakistan, but we are not going to have any local food because we think it will make us sick and we don't dare try any of it. And they're quite upfront about it. And they tease each other all the time. He and Backpacker Ben, they actually made a specific trip by taxi to Burns Street, which I wasn't aware of this, but I guess Burns Street in Karachi is the food street. It's an outdoor food street, and you go there to try all the local food. And the two of them went there deliberately. They chose to go there, but when they got there, they just teased each other. Like, they'd be standing in front of like this place selling jalebi, and then Simon Wilson, I think, turned to Ben and said, "Oh, so what did you think of it? Did you think it was good?" And then Ben would say, "Oh, it was delicious, delicious." And then he would tease him, like, "I didn't see you even eat one. Did you eat one?" So, "Oh, yeah, I tried one. You just didn't get it on video. You were filming over there. Then I ate a whole bunch of them, but you just didn't see me do it," right? And they're just laughing and joking because they both know neither of them is going to try this jalebi. They don't dare. And then they just make a joke about it, you know, and they go on to the next one. It's like, "Oh, what is this?" And, "Oh, yeah, let me try some of that." And it's like, "Oh, you didn't have any." "Oh, yes, I did. You just didn't see me. You know, you didn't take it." It was just a weird thing to do. I talked about this in a previous video, though, where one of my ideas is that they knew they were going to be in Pakistan for a very short amount of time, like 4 days or something, because their flight out of the country is already booked or something. And if that's the case, maybe they don't dare get sick. You know, like if you, on your very first day, you go to the street food market and you eat like 5-10 different things that your body isn't accustomed to, and you end up, you know, with diarrhea the next day, well, your whole trip is ruined because you can't do, you know, you're stuck. But if you're only going to be there for 4 days, you can't risk getting ill, and then maybe that's why they don't try. So they only ate at McDonald's and at fancy, I assume, fancy restaurants inside their expensive hotels, because they never showed any of their meals or anything they eat. So, yeah, that was Simon Wilson. I was expecting more from him, and in particular, I was interested in how he filmed. And this gets back to what I said about, I'm going to talk about their camera gear, because Bald and Bankrupt and Backpacker Ben, they both use a Sony X3000, small, lightweight, simple camera with no microphones, nothing at all. And then right away you'd notice Simon Wilson is different because he's got more of a Casey Neistat rig which is like a, I don't know which one it is. I still haven't been able to find out, but it's a Canon R something. Could be a full frame camera, could be APS-C, I'm not sure, but it's a big real camera with a big shotgun mic with a big fuzzy wind muff on it, and then a giant Joby GorillaPod. So, I mean, it's not as big as some camera rigs I've seen. You know, people who travel with a, you know, Sony a7S III and a big zoom lens, and, you know, they have a huge camera rig. This is not as big as that because he even has a tiny, almost like a pancake lens on the front. But compared to the Sony X3000, or, you know, compared to, you know, a GoPro, it's huge. And you really see it in Backpacker Ben's video because he films Simon Wilson, and you see him with his big camera, you know. And then even when they climbed onto the top of the bus and down from the bus, Simon couldn't do it because he can't hold on to his camera and climb up and down at the same time. So he has to hand his camera down to Backpacker Ben. This is on video. He says, here, I can't do it with my camera. Here, you take my camera first. And he gives it, and then he can climb down, and then Backpacker Ben is filming him as he's climbing down, and then he gives him his camera back. Because in all these situations, his camera is too big to, like, it's not like an X3000 or a GoPro, right? So you know, me being me, I'm thinking, okay, so what is the advantage? So I'm waiting to see his video. Okay, was there a huge advantage to him carrying around that big camera? Is the video better? Did he get a lot of close-ups, slow pans of everything? Did he add beautiful cinematic B-roll and music? And was the microphone producing crystal clear audio? So, like, I expected his video to be leagues better than what they got with their X3000. And yet, the opposite was true. For my money, Simon Wilson's video from a filming point of view is the worst of the bunch by far, because he's holding the thing here and it's tight on his face. The X3000 is wide. This Canon lens isn't wide enough. It's got like right on his face, and it's just like bouncing all over the place, just waving around and shaking and moving and shaking. It's got like no stabilization at all. It's like I couldn't even watch the video sometimes. I had to kind of look away from it, close my eyes, like I'm getting seasick. There's nothing special about the audio, nothing special about the video, nothing special about his filming techniques. He didn't take advantage of having a more professional camera. He didn't produce higher quality video. There was no reason for him to be carrying that big camera with the big microphone and with the big GorillaPod, you know, because, you know, the reason you use a Joby GorillaPod is because it has tripod legs, so you can put the camera down on a tripod and you can wrap it around things. You know, you can wrap it around a tree, wrap it around a table, wrap it around anything around you, and then you can get video of you, you know, with your hands free. But as far as I can tell, in the entire video, he never used it. Like, he never ever once put the camera down on the tripod or wrapped it around anything to get any kind of a unique perspective. He just held it in his hand the whole time. So what was the point? He could have just, you know, he could have just held the camera in his hand. He didn't need the GorillaPod. You know, at least Casey Neistat, he mounts his, well, in the old days, you know, when he did all of his New York vlogs, he would mount his camera all over the place. He's going out for a run, and then he would put his camera down on the ground on a tripod, and he'd run back, and then he'd run into the camera frame, and then run up to the camera, and then talk into the camera. You know, he would put his camera using his GorillaPod in all kinds of unusual places. It made sense for him to have it, but Simon Wilson, he never used it. He didn't get good video, he didn't get good audio. He might as well have just tossed that thing into the river and then used a smartphone or used an X3000 or used a tiny GoPro. I saw no advantage in his video at all. In fact, everything in his video was worse than what they got with their tiny X3000. Certainly not better. So anyway, I found that interesting from that point of view. Recently, I talked about this couple from the UK, Tread the Globe. A video they shot here in Malaysia was all about them being stopped by the police for speeding, and then the police officer said, oh, well, you can go to the police station and pay 300 ringgit, or you can pay an on the spot fine, 100 ringgit, give it to me, and everything is okay. So of course they paid 100 ringgit. Why would you not? And then of course that turned into a big story. The video went viral, and then the police in Malaysia are investigating now to see whether, this police officer, was that corruption? Did he act correctly or not? They're investigating this. As far as I'm aware, they haven't concluded their investigation yet. So, anything I might say about it would just be speculation at this point. But of course, not everyone, but a lot of Malaysians who left comments after the video were saying, yes, that is clearly a corrupt police officer. He was asking for a bribe, and this is very common in Malaysia. It's a big problem here. So it turned into a story. And I talked about that in a previous video, and then I noticed that they posted another video where they had another big problem, and they were trying to drive their van from Malaysia into Thailand. And the video was called, We've Got to Leave Malaysia, but Our UK Vans Denied Entry. And I was thinking about this quite a bit because you see a lot of videos from people, like Itchy Boots, going around the world on a motorcycle, people going around in a van, or in a car or a van, or as in this case, a camper van. So it's like an RV, it's an RV, it's like a mini RV. And then there are some countries, I couldn't remember whether it was Vietnam, I think it's Vietnam, they do not allow any camper vans into the country, period. I saw that in some other videos, people who are going around the world by camper van, and they had plans. Their route involved going through Vietnam, and to their surprise, when they got to the border, they were denied entry because no camper vans allowed into Vietnam, period. So I kind of got confused, and I thought, okay, maybe it's Thailand I was thinking about, and maybe they're not being allowed into Thailand because of this no camper van rule. And I'm interested in these stories partially because I think about, is it worth it? I get the appeal. You're there in the UK. Oh, they have money in the bank. Obviously, they have money to spend. And then they're retired. How are they going to spend their retirement? And they come up with this idea, this adventure. Why don't we buy an RV, a camper van, and travel around the world for our retirement? And it seems like a very exciting adventure. But in reality, to me, I think there's a strong argument to be made that traveling by camper van is far more trouble than it's worth. And every time I watch one of these videos, that's all I think about is like, oh, what is the point? You're just making your life so difficult. Parking, permits, licenses, taxes, where do you keep it? Sleeping in it at night, well, how do you do that without the police giving you a hard time? The image is very romantic, but I think the reality is so much trouble that you have to ask yourself, is it worth it? Why don't we just get rid of the camper van and get ourselves a backpack, or, a bicycle maybe? Bicycle in some ways is the easiest because it can cross borders and there are no permits involved. There's no taxes, there's no driver's license, you don't need insurance for it. A bicycle is the easiest, but of course it is also the slowest. But even a bicycle can be a real anchor around your neck. It reduces your mobility in some ways because now you're trying to get it through train stations, or you get stuck somewhere, your visa expired and you have to fly out of the country. and you got to box up your bicycle and get it to the airport, and then you go to the hotel, but the hotel has no place to put a bicycle. Your room is too small, the stairs are too narrow. You know, after a while your bicycle can be a real hindrance to living. So if even a bicycle is like an anchor around your neck, imagine what a motorcycle is like, and then imagine what a camper van is like. You know, it's like, is it worth it? If you ask me, no, I don't think it's worth it. I wouldn't even dream of trying to go around the world by camper van. The excitement of it, the convenience of having your own home on wheels, that doesn't outweigh the problems that it also brings with it. And in this case, they ran into a particular problem because they exited from Malaysia, got all their papers stamped, you know, their permits, their carnet de passage, all the documents, everything they needed to do to exit Malaysia. So then they went up to the border crossing to get into Thailand, and they denied them entry. But then what do, right? You are in no man's land. And I always wonder how people deal with that, because they can't go forward, but they can't go back either. You know, they've exited from Malaysia. They've canceled everything to do with Malaysia. So they can't go back, they can't go forward, so they're like trapped. And in this case, the problem is they tried to get insurance for their camper van to enter Thailand, and then they had trouble doing that because of the computer systems and the license plate number. They had no category in the computer for covering camper vans. They could enter the license plate for a car, for a motor, you know, but they couldn't somehow enter it. The system would reject it because it's a camper van. But somehow they fixed that, and then they needed a permit, but then they were told at the border, no, because you have a camper van, this permit is for vehicles, like a personal car. This permit does not cover camper vans. To get a camper van permit, you have to contact the Ministry of Transportation, and this happened to be this was at the end of the day. All the offices are going to be closed, and it was the beginning of a 4-day weekend. So, you know, they're closed on right now, and then they're going to be closed for like Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. So the earliest they could get anything done was going to be Tuesday. So what can we do until then? You know, we're just like stuck in no man's land. So I'm watching that video and I'm thinking, man, just grab your passport, grab your GoPro and your toothbrush, and just walk away. Just leave the van there. That would have been my feeling. It's like, okay, this is getting to be too much. And I would just leave it in the parking lot and just walk away. You know, it's an anchor around your neck. Just leave it behind. But anyway, the woman, she seems like a very resourceful person. Like they told them, the man and the woman, husband and wife, you have to call the Ministry of Transportation. Here's the phone number. I would have been stuck right there. I'm like, how do I make a phone call? I still don't know how to make a phone call, but apparently they know how. And the next thing we know, we see video of her on the phone, just like talking to the ministry. She got through. She got hold of someone who could speak English, and then she's just, you know, talking. Oh yeah, our situation, we need a permit, and and then she's on the phone, you know, making phone call after phone call, and she's just working the problem like a champion. I would be freaking out. I would be at the end of my rope, you know, but she clearly revels in this, and she was just in command of the situation, got it all worked out, and then it turned out that they couldn't do anything until after the holiday. That was clear. But once the dust had settled, she was given a choice that you could get a $500 permit now, but you would have to drive to another border crossing. Or you could wait until next Tuesday and get an $800 permit. Right? So again, this gets back to, is it worth it? I was thinking $500, then $800? Are you kidding me? But they were treating it like, oh, okay, $800. Okay, that's okay. That's okay. I'm like, man, okay, you got money to spend. If an $800 permit to get your van into Thailand, probably for a 30-day visit, it's like, wow. Maybe they get the $800 back, but I don't think so. I think they have to pay $800 US just to bring the van into the country. And I'm like, forget that. But they were going to do it. And then they agreed to do that. And then through talking to immigration, talking to customs, they eventually got permission that even though they were not allowed to enter Thailand yet, they gave them permission to drive across the border to their hotel, which they had pre-booked, and then they can stay in that hotel until they get their permit, and then once they have their permit, they can go back to the border, get the stamp on their permit, then they can enter the country. And then they ended up spending 10 days in this hotel, 4 days of the holiday. Then on the Tuesday, they applied for their permit with the Ministry of Transportation, and then it took a week or 10 days more to process that. And then they were just staying in this fancy hotel the entire time, just waiting. And then they got a package delivered, and it contained their permits. And then they were then they had to go back to immigration, get everything stamped, and then they were finally allowed to enter Thailand. It's like, oh man, you know? What a nightmare. Like, I'm amazed that they were so good-natured about it. And as I said, if it were me, I'd be on foot. I would have left the camper van in the parking lot. I just would have walked away from it. It's like, call the Ministry of Transportation. Nah, I'm done. You know, that's a dead end for me. And then, you know, you have to pay $800. No, thank you. But I am curious about some of the other logistics too, that, you know, you enter Thailand with a 30-day visa. I'm wondering, even like they were allowed to enter Thailand and wait like 10 days to 2 weeks until they get that permit. But are those 10 days to 2 weeks, are they deducted from the visa at the border? Or were they allowed to just stay in Thailand for 2 weeks, completely visa-free, and then when they finally got the permit, then did they get their tourist visa, and now the 30-day clock started ticking? Yeah, I don't really know. Anyway, it was an interesting video to watch, just from the point of view of the story. I was involved in the tension of the story, like, oh, what's going to happen? You know, are they going to be denied entry permanently, or are they going to be able to fix the problem? And it's also an interesting video for me from the point of view of just travel in general. You know, what does it mean to travel on foot with a backpack as opposed to a bicycle or a motorcycle, or going by train or by bus, or having your own camper van? You know, what are the pros and cons, advantages and disadvantages? And that can be an interesting question too if you want to record your journey for social media. What does that do to your journey? Because I think when you have like a camper van, your video's subject is traveling by camper van, because that absorbs so much of your attention, so much of your time and energy. That's the story, traveling by camper van. Whereas if you go to Thailand, say with a small knapsack, nothing else, then the story is Thailand. Do you see what I mean? I think you just naturally end up with more energy, more time, more focus for actually talking about Thailand in your videos, learning about Thailand. Whereas if you go through Thailand on a camper van, the video, the story is traveling in a camper van with Thailand as the backdrop. But maybe if you're traveling with just a small bag, then the main story is the country you're visiting. And yeah, so the country isn't a backdrop, it is the main character in your story, right? Living in Thailand would be the story, rather than living in a camper van in Thailand, if you see what I mean. Anyway, it's an interesting question. I watched a movie the other day. I had my laptop busy exporting and uploading videos, so I couldn't do anything else. And I watched a video on my tablet. Not a huge video. I stumbled across it. I think I saw a YouTube short. It was about some sort of guy who was a mathematical genius. And it was one of those classic scenes, you see it in Good Will Hunting. There's a whole bunch of movies that are like this, where there's like a genius and he goes into a classroom and the teacher, focuses on them and attacks them and makes fun of them. And then the student actually shows up the teacher and demonstrates that they're actually some kind of a super genius, and everybody's amazed at what a genius they are. Anyway, that clip was on a YouTube short, and I kind of enjoyed it, and I thought, oh, I wonder what that movie is. So I've tracked down the movie, and the movie was called The Man Who Knew Infinity. And it's based on a true story, and unfortunately, I'm going to have to look up the name of the person because I don't have it on the tip of my tongue, because the central character is from India, and he has an Indian name, which I don't have committed to memory. I got it? So his name is Srinivasa Ramanujan. And the story of this young man is that he was born in Tamil Nadu. It wasn't called Tamil Nadu at the time. It was called Mysore State back in 1887. And he demonstrated an ability in mathematics, and then he eventually managed to go to Cambridge University in London, and then his life continued from there, and he is known today as a revolutionary figure in mathematics. He was a genius. He just had an intuitive grasp of a branch of mathematics, a complex branch of mathematics that I don't understand at all. The average person, of course, can't even understand the basics, let alone grasp what a man like this is talking about. But apparently, yeah, he was a genius. Even among geniuses, he was a genius. So, then getting back to the movie, it stars Dev Patel, of course, as this mathematical genius, and Jeremy Irons, who played a Cambridge professor, who was also a very famous mathematician named Hardy, I believe. See, an English name I can remember, Hardy. Oh, okay, I've got that straight in my head. But Ramanujan doesn't automatically, I don't have it at the tips of my fingers. But anyway, so it's played by Dev Patel and Jeremy Irons. The movie is good. It's a biopic. I wouldn't call it great. It's good. It tells the story well. It's interesting. The acting is good. The story itself for me, is really complicated. There's a lot going on in the background because there's mathematics going on that I don't understand at all. I saw a number of reviews of the movie where they said, oh, the movie did a really good job of explaining the mathematics to you. And I'm begged to differ, because I have no idea what they're talking about, like nothing. It's like I accept that this is advanced mathematics and you have to be a genius to understand it, and that this is helpful mathematics. People need these discoveries, but I didn't understand any of it. Couldn't even understand how it could be useful. It was kind of a weird branch of mathematics because Ramanujan was challenged to provide proofs. Like he would write out a formula, just like Good Will Hunting on the whiteboard in the high school. There was a mathematical formula that nobody had ever been able to solve. And then, Good Will Hunting, he just kind of went up there and went, and he solved this thing that nobody could ever solve. And there's the formula. And I guess Ramanujan, let me double check that name. Yeah, Ramanujan, something like that. He just out of his head could just come up with these formulas and say, here is the formula, there it is. But at Cambridge, they didn't accept that because these formulas were so complex, there's no way to prove whether they're right or wrong. Or to prove that even they're right would take you 100,000 years to do the calculations to even confirm that the formula is correct, or something like that. Anyway, I didn't understand any of it. But then they had this scene where he was challenged to provide a proof and then use the formula and use the proof to calculate something. And he did it like overnight. He just went back to his room and he did it, came back the next day, and they compared it, I guess they compared it to the actual answer. And they said, oh, his answer is within 0.2% of the correct answer. And apparently this was some sort of a miraculous thing that he was so close, But my understanding of mathematics is, well, you can't be within 2% or 0.2% of the right answer. The whole point of mathematics is it gives you the perfect answer. 2 plus 2 is 4. You can't be within 2% of 4. So how in the world is this branch of mathematics allowed to be off? And yet it's still one of the most incredible discoveries of history. Anyway, the whole thing just went way, way over my head in terms of the mathematics. And of course, the reviews, they focused on what you would probably expected to focus on, his genius, the struggles he went through, racism when he went to London, and trying to be accepted as a mathematician, and yet because he's from India, nobody would give him an opportunity. There's scenes in the movie where he's beaten up on the street just for being from India, and people resented him. So all that is in the movie, all the things he had to overcome, and he was a genius. And so that's kind of what all the reviews focused on. Planet Doug, in my brain, I couldn't help but focus on something else, because we've seen these biopic movies all the time. People overcome, problems in their life, racism or whatever, and they're heroes, and the biopic presents them as a hero. But in the movie, I found this guy so frustrating, and I'm going to get into spoilers here about his life and about the movie. So spoiler warning, spoiler alert, if you don't want to know, stop watching my video. And so what happened to him is he went to London, and then he developed tuberculosis, and then he died at the age of 32. And reading between the lines, he got tuberculosis, I think. He developed tuberculosis, and he died because he wasn't eating properly, and he had no heating in his room, and he couldn't adjust to the climate of the UK, coming from India. And he was also separated from his wife, who had to remain behind in India, and he faced so many struggles. I think mentally he was simply depressed. And I firmly believe this, is that your mental state has a lot to do with the strength of your immune system, because all of us, I believe, fight off tuberculosis all the time. The tuberculosis bacterium, it exists, and we breathe it into our lungs, and then our immune system kills it. But some people, the tuberculosis bacterium, whatever it is, it gains a foothold, starts to reproduce, and our body can't fight it off, and then you get tuberculosis. But if you are stressed out, you're not getting enough rest, you're unhappy, you're not eating well, your immune system is weakened, and then that can contribute to diseases occurring because your body's immune system is weakened because of your mental state, because of stress, and then you develop the disease. And then this guy just frustrated me no end, because he faced all these problems, and he never, according to the movie, he never told anybody about them. He played the noble hero. And in my view, that's the same thing as playing the victim. So, for example, they have this scene where he's in Cambridge, and of course, he's a fish out of water. He doesn't know anything. He doesn't know anything about the culture of the UK, about Cambridge University, what he's supposed to do, not do. And he goes to the dining hall, and then they're giving everybody their food, but he's a vegetarian. But in the dining hall, it's all based on meat. Even the vegetables, like potatoes, are cooked in lard. So he can't eat in the cafeteria at all. So he basically goes there for his first meal. He can't have anything to eat, and then he leaves. He's actually feeling really ill because he was eating the potatoes, and then somebody told him, oh, you know, those potatoes are cooked in, lard, pig fat, or whatever. And then he's sick to his stomach, and he runs out. And then his mentor, Professor Hardy, played by Jeremy Irons, runs out after him because he's worried about him and says, oh, did you have a good meal? And at that point, what I think he should have said is, no, I couldn't eat anything because I'm vegetarian and they only have meat. That's what he should have said. But he didn't. He just lied and says, oh, it was wonderful. Oh, I'm so full. I had such a good meal. I'm fine. But he should have told Hardy the truth, because Hardy is he's a powerful figure in Cambridge University. He's a fellow of the university. He is his sponsor. And if he told him, oh, I'm a vegetarian, his sponsor would have gone to the kitchen and said, listen, we've got a genius here from India. We need to make vegetarian food for him. But he never told anybody that he was struggling. And then he kept having to go get his own food, cook his own food. And then World War I came along. Everything was rationed. He couldn't get good food. And they showed him in the movie over and over again, trying to cook his food. And it tastes terrible. And he's obviously starving to death. He can't eat. He doesn't have any food. And he's becoming ill. But he never told anyone. And I'm screaming at the movie, will you tell someone? Don't sit in your room starving to death because you're in another country. Go talk to somebody. Professor Hardy, tell him, I'm starving. And then his room was ice cold, apparently. He was freezing all the time because he didn't have enough heat in his room. So then he's shivering in his room. He's so cold. He doesn't have any food. And then he goes out onto the streets, and these 3 soldiers, beat him half to death because he's from India. The guy is dying. He's developing tuberculosis, I think, because he was so weakened by his diet and how cold his room was. He was getting ill. And then he just never told anybody. And then he developed tuberculosis and he died. And I see that in movies and TV shows all the time, where somehow it's considered noble to suffer in silence. And I suppose to an extent there's nobility there, but for him, again, I'm thinking, from day one, just talk to Professor Hardy. He's like, oh, by the way, you asked me to come all the way to London because I'm such a genius. I think the least you can do is talk to the kitchen, have them make some food that I can eat, and so I don't die of starvation, And by the way, my room is ice cold and I'm freezing to death. And oh, by the way, every time I go outside, I get kicked in the head because I'm from India. Maybe we can fix some of these problems. And if they fix them, maybe he wouldn't have gotten tuberculosis, and maybe he would have lived a full and happy life. And it's the same thing with his wife. He was separated from his wife, and this was a huge part of the movie. There was a big tragedy involved in that. And I'm thinking, well, go talk to Professor Hardy and say, listen, you can see my work. You see that I'm a genius. I'm offering something very valuable to Cambridge University. What do you think we get my wife from India and have her come to London? Do you think we can do that? And then I'm sure Professor Hardy would have said, oh, sure, let's take care of that. Well, we go through the entire movie where Ramanujan is unhappy and he's stressed out and he's really, really angry. He's dying of tuberculosis, and he finally tells Professor Hardy in this big argument, like, you have no idea what I'm dealing with. You don't know what I've given up. I'm married, I have a life in India, my wife is still in India. But this is the first time Professor Hardy has even heard of this. Like, he didn't know he was married. He didn't know he had a wife in India. If he had told him, well, maybe he would have said, oh, well, I'll talk to the university, we'll come up with 500 pounds and we'll put your wife on a ship and we'll bring her to London. It's like, just, I don't know, this whole victim thing. It feels like at some point he could have mentioned any of these problems that he was facing rather than suffer in silence, Anyway, that was kind of my takeaway from the movie The Man Who Knew Infinity. Good film, not a great film, but I'm glad I watched it. It was interesting, it was different. I learned about someone that I'd never heard of before. I have reached the pet peeve section of the behind the scenes video. I have so many pet peeves. I could talk for like 5 hours, but the one that's on my mind recently, I think I've talked about it before as a pet peeve, but I want to mention it again because I don't understand it. And this is how YouTube works for comments. Two different ways. One is, what happened to YouTuber names? Did something change? Because I can't pinpoint the exact moment, but it feels like on my Planet Doug YouTube channel, there were people who would leave comments, people who have their own YouTube channel, and I became very familiar with their names. I know who this person is, and we've talked before, this person, and they had certain names that made sense. They were made up of English words and English letters in a way that had meaning. And then it feels like one day I woke up and all those YouTube names disappeared. And suddenly I get a comment on a video and it's from XX3928 do la la. I don't know, it's just like a series of numbers and letters. You know how people, when they make up like an ID for a website or a forum, and the name is already taken, and they just use the name plus 99 at the end or something just to make it different. But anyway, these just look like serial numbers, and it feels like something weird happened, that all the YouTuber names that people chose disappeared and were replaced with their YouTube ID account numbers or something. Anyway, that just seems really weird to me, and I haven't heard anybody talk about this or mention it in YouTube in general, but it feels like something happened. Like, was there a big change that I missed? A big announcement? I don't know. And this is connected to my next pet peeve because I've been replying to comments, and I remember in the old days, if you clicked on a comment to reply to it, whether it was the original comment or a reply to that comment, it automatically put in a at that person. So you could see who you're talking to. That's gone. Like, I don't know when it happened, like a while back, this suddenly vanished. So there might be a comment that someone leaves and it creates a thread where 3 people are talking back and forth about that subject. And somebody says something and I want to reply to what that person said. So I hit the reply button and I'm typing what I want to say, but there's no indication of who I'm talking to or what I'm replying to. You know, am I replying to the original comment? Am I replying to the first person? Am I replying to the second, the third? Or like some person might leave 4 comments as a back and forth discussion. And in one of them, you know, he says something, but I want to reply to that comment, but there's no way in the YouTube system to specify who you're talking to and what you're replying to. And this drives me crazy. I don't know why they took away this ability. And then YouTube and large internet companies, they do this all the time. They remove features and there's never any explanation, and they're always really useful features, and they just take them away. They just vanish one day, and I don't know why. So those are my two pet peeves, and I just thought of a third one, which is not really a pet peeve. It's actually a good thing, but it's connected to a pet peeve. I was just on YouTube the other day on my dashboard, and I saw an announcement like, yay! You can now upload videos directly from YouTube Studio on your phone. And that's a good thing, except for two things. It's good, except that I've been talking about this forever, about how dumb it is that, you know, YouTube has a specific app which is designed for people who make and post videos. Like, this is my control center for the Planet Doug video YouTube empire. And yet in this control app, it can do everything I want, but the one thing it can't do is upload a video, right? It was like that for years and years and years and years. And I kept staring at that as like, how dumb is it that the app for YouTubers to control their YouTube channel, from that app, you can't even upload a video. It was just like the dumbest thing ever. So, but now that YouTube says they've fixed the problem, okay, great news. You can now upload videos. I don't like the way they're patting themselves on the back for that. It's like, okay, don't tell me, don't trumpet your great achievement, you know, that we're giving you this new amazing feature. And aren't we amazing for giving it to you? No, you're fixing a problem that you should have fixed 5 years ago. You know, you're late to the party. So, you know, so don't, you know, give yourself such a praise, you know, for doing this. So I thought that was kind of funny. And by the way, if you notice from time to time a certain jumpiness in my video, like where I'm speaking and then it just sort of jumps to me speaking, but I've moved or something has changed. The reason for that is another pet peeve of mine, in that this Olympus camera that I'm using is one of these older style cameras that has a time limit. So it drives me nuts that the Olympus will only record video for 7 minutes. Sometimes, I don't know why, sometimes it goes up to 8 or even 9 minutes, but normally it's somewhere between 7 and 8 minutes, and then it just turns off. So it can record video for 7 minutes and then it just stops. So I have to get up and restart the camera, and then, you know, I have to hit the record button again and it starts a new video file. And then after 7 minutes, stops recording and I have to get up. So every 7 minutes in the middle of whatever it is I'm talking about, it usually happens at the worst possible time, right in the middle of a sentence, the camera just stops recording. So then I have to get up, go to my camera, and then actually I have to play back the video all the way to the end just so I can see where it stopped recording. And I have to remember what I was saying at that time, because I'm like mid-sentence. And then I have to, okay, I was talking right there. Okay, that's where it picks up. And then I have to start recording again, come here, sit down, and then I have to start speaking from where the video got cut off, and then make it look like it was seamless, right? And then 7 minutes later, it happens again. And it's what, you know, in a long video like this, as you can tell, I mean, it would happen over and over and over, and it starts to drive me a bit nuts. And then the battery constantly runs out, so I've had to change the battery 2 times. So anyway, I hit the 7-minute limit. How many times has that happened? I'm certainly getting my exercise in these BTS videos, because every single time I have to get up, walk to the camera, do a bunch of stuff, bend over, change, you know, do this, do that, come back here, get settled in, start over again, 7 minutes, back up. It's like it's like an exercise program. So I don't know how many times that happened, and then 2 times to change the battery, and 2 times because the memory card filled up. So it's like, oh man. The technology I'm using is not really suited to this kind of studio, you know, recording. Yeah, I need a camera that doesn't have the time limit anymore, or at least give me a 30-minute time limit, like record for 30 minutes and then turn off. Then it might happen, you know, once in a behind the scenes video. But if it happens every 7 minutes, it drives you crazy after a while. And I would love to have a camera that you plug it into the wall and it just runs power off the outlet, right? Instead of having to change batteries constantly. And then of course, whenever I'm done recording a video, now I have to recharge all 3 batteries to the fullest extent. And it's just a long, complicated process. So this camera, as much as I like it and how much I use it, you know, I'm really, really glad that I have it. It also is not quite the right tool for the job. So yeah. Anyway, that pet peeve explains why the video jumps all the time, because the camera just constantly turns off and I have to restart it over and over again. Just in case you're curious. All right, that is it for this morning. I'm going to shut down, winding down my BTS video. I had a whole bunch of other things I wanted to talk about, but I think I have babbled on long enough. These BTS videos have gotten longer and longer, and now they're getting a little bit out of control. So I think I have to dial it back a little bit in the things that I talk about, you know. But I often have a lot of thoughts on my mind, and I enjoy making them. You know, they're a lot of fun. So that is it. I'm shutting down. I'm going to start my day here in Port Dickson. I said in an earlier video and in a community tab update, I was thinking about going to this ostrich farm near here, just for the experience and to record a video focusing on some of the nearby tourist attractions. But I don't think I'm going to do that anymore. I did a deep dive into the reviews, and it really does seem like a place. So you go there with your family, if you have a bunch of children, and they would get really excited about seeing one donkey, you know, some chickens, some guinea pigs, or whatever they are, and some ostriches and things like that. I mean, if I went there to shoot a video, I would enjoy it. When you go there, you get to feed the animals. You buy grass and grain, and then you can go around and feed the animals. And then they have a train ride, and they have all these activities, but they're really meant for children. And I'm pretty sure that if I made a video about it, about 122 people worldwide would watch the video and think it was a worthwhile thing to do, right? So I think when you're going to invest, I mean, that's the thing about video and shooting YouTube videos, you do reach the point where you have to ask yourself, is it worth it? You know, is the subject worth the squeeze? Because, yeah, I mean, you can make a video about going to the ostrich farm, and then you can spend 6 hours editing that video, or if it's a really complicated one, it could take 2 days to finish that video. And if 122 people are going to watch it, like, what are you doing with your life? So I think you have to eventually, as a YouTuber, you do get pushed towards, okay, if you're going to go to all the trouble of making and uploading a video, the subject has to be big. Otherwise, there's no point. And I think for me in YouTube, that's where I struggle a little bit, because the big things that people are interested in, I'm not that excited about. Like in Sumatra, for example, when I was there, I'm well aware that you are supposed to go look at an orangutan at Bukit Lawang. Just before I left Medan, I met another foreigner. He was like the only guy I met, I think, the whole time that I was there. I saw this guy sitting outside my hotel looking at like a Lonely Planet guidebook. I was like, whoa, that's kind of interesting. I went to have lunch, and then when I came back, he was still sitting there. And then I took a chance, and I just said, hey, you know, foreigner, you know, do you want to have the foreigner chat? So I started chatting with him, and I got a little bit of his story, and he came to Medan only to go to Bukit Lawang to look at orangutans, because as a foreign visitor, you look up tourist attractions, you know, that's the number one. Go to Bukit Lawang and look at an orangutan. So like if you're going to go to Sumatra as a YouTuber, you have to go there to go look at orangutans. People want to see that video. And in my case, I'm like, I don't see the excitement. I really don't. It's what everybody does. And if I go there, so you go down the trail and then this orangutan is there. And the only reason that orangutan is even there is because it knows that all these foreigners come and they get food and they get fed. You know, it's sort of a, I remember I went to see the Ramat Wildlife Museum in Medan, and there was one person in particular, there were probably more than one, who criticized me for doing that, saying like, why in the world would you go to a wildlife museum where they have a dead orangutan mounted? You know, it's like a trophy display. Like, why would you go there when what you should do is go into the wild where the orangutan are running free, and then you can see the orangutan in their natural habitat. So that, I mean, that is the knee-jerk reaction you'll get from everybody. And I see their point, but at the same time, I think if you go to Bukit Lawang and you go into the nature preserve, you're not really seeing the orangutan in their natural state anymore either. You know, Bukit Lawang is growing and growing. It's a big tourist attraction. You go there as a tourist. It's developed as a tourist attraction. It may have started as, you know, something very small. Go into the jungle and you see the orangutan in their natural habitat. But it's not really like that anymore. You go there and there's dozens, you know, who knows how many people offering the trekking service, and they're portraying it as going into the nature preserve and seeing it. But, you know, the orangutan are there because of it's a tourist attraction now. So my instinct is not to go there. I don't go to the famous waterfall, you know. So after a while, if you're making YouTube videos and you're not really that interested in the big tourist attractions, and the subject of your videos is you and your life, well, how many people are interested in you and your life? You know, your mother, you know, an aunt who takes a special interest in what you're doing, you know. Oh, my nephew Doug is going to Indonesia, I'll watch his videos. But to make the subject of your videos your life and your personality, you know, your life and your personality better be really interesting in some way. You know, that's just the way YouTube works. So anyway, why did I get on that topic? Okay, yeah, ostrich farm. To be honest, you know, you post a video to YouTube. I visited the ostrich farm in Port Dickson. There's nothing in that video title to attract a wide audience. And if it's going to take you 10 hours to edit and upload the video, is it worth it? And to be honest, I'm kind of thinking right now, nah, I'm not going to bother. You know, I don't think I'm going to shoot a video at the ostrich farm. We'll see. Maybe I'll do it, maybe I won't. May do that this afternoon. All right, shutting down. Thanks for keeping me company, listening to me babble about my thoughts. And if you return, I will see you in the next behind the scenes video. Have a good day.